Chess.com strongly condemns Russia's invasion and war against Ukraine. Ukraine is a great nation, a great chess nation, and we are daily saddened by the senseless suffering inflicted upon Ukrainians by the Russian government and its military. After careful consideration, with input from across our community and our leadership team, we are electing to keep our servers and events open to Russian players. We believe that isolation of ordinary Russian citizens only makes it easier for autocracy and propaganda to rule in Russia. However, we cannot support symbols and speech representing Russia and its war in Ukraine. For this reason, on our server and in all of our events going forward, including the one you are about to watch, Chess.com will no longer be displaying the Russian flag for any players. Additionally, we are replacing the Russian flag across our entire website with a new neutral blue flag that links directly to our policy on the war. We are electing to use our platform to communicate truth and provide information on how to support Ukraine rather than isolate Russian citizens further. For more information on our position, our actions, and ways you can support Ukraine, type the command Ukraine in chat or visit the link directly shared by one of our moderators right now. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you around on chess.com.
So Bortnik though is, oh gosh, oh, he didn't trade the queens. It was...
That was probably winning, and now I don't think it is anymore. And Bortnik is just pre-moving every single move. Is Rusumov gonna flag him here? 2 seconds for Bortnik.
Oh my god, don't flag.
Oh, I mean, at this rate, Bortnik is gonna flag him. Oh, that's a free queen.
He won the queen! Oh my god!
but the queen, but Black hung his queen. Just pre-move. It's gonna be a draw, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Simply how chess works.
Okay, the king starts coming. But of course, Black can't really make progress here. So actually, he has a really nice setup where he can just shift back and forth forever.
But now Fabian is putting the bishop on d3 maybe to make sure he cannot pre-move anymore.
Okay.
Okay, now maybe you walk the king around.
Yeah, the other thing that's important to note, so you can't move the bishop here. So when the king is on a2, if you move the bishop away, then bishop b1 check, king a1, bishop c2 is going to win.
Bishop. What if you move the bishop?
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, king e2, king e2.
Oh my god, Fabi got him.
What a nice maneuver. Yeah, the bishop has to move and Fabiano wins the game.
That was so clever. So using the king to block the rook.
King, rook h2 here? Yeah, but rook h3?
What's king e6?
Rook h1. Wait, what was king? Was that a mouse slip?
I think that had to be a mouse slip. What in the world is king e6? Oh my god!
Oh, but h2. How do you stop the pawn?
He's gonna lose.
Rook f4, rook g5.
Yeah, rook g5 and goes to h5. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but if you go h2 here, isn't it just a draw? Rook g1.
Yeah, rook g1 is perfect. And rook g6. I guess also watch out for this one little check.
But king g7. Yeah. It's over. Dubel's gonna lose. King g7. It's game over.
This is shocking.
Insane. h2, rook g1. It's over. King h6.
Yeah, he's gonna go rook b8. Okay.
And rook g1. Rook g1. It's over.
It's done.
Incredible. h1. Just h1.
How did that happen? The mouse slip.
I guess he mouse slipped because he wanted to go king e5 and amazing piece sacrifice by Grischuk. Just e4, you're just crashing through in the center and
take with the rook pre-move.
Looks over.
Oh my goodness.
Take or e3. Anything should be winning here. e3, I think.
Even king takes g7. You know, just this piece is hanging. But either is super
I mean, what do
nice.
you do against pawn and Grischuk? What an amazing win to clinch week 16 of the Rapid Chess.
We are joined by the winner of the week 16 KO, Alexander Grischuk. And Alexander, what a day you had. How do you feel after that bullet victory? You seemed like you were stressed and then you could finally breathe for the first time in a few hours.
Yeah, I'm extremely happy, especially, since pandemic started, I was struggling greatly in chess. Okay, I also had a very bad mood for 2 years because of this, everything connected with pandemic, with the masks. Yeah, I'm extremely happy, actually, just extremely. And you know what, that like around 1 month ago, I said to my wife that basically I have two ambitions left in chess: is to win title Tuesday and this weekend rapid. And basically, if I win it, I can retire with a clear conscience. But you know what? I won, and now I don't want to retire.
Welcome everybody to the Rapid Chess Championship. It is Saturday. No better way to start your weekend than with a healthy dose of the RCC presented by Coinbase. I'm Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, and alongside me today, once again, my partner in crime, Grandmaster Robert Hess. Robert, good noon, good morning, good afternoon, however you want to phrase it. Good afternoon to you. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Thanks for asking, Danya. I mean, we have an electric day ahead of us. We have all these participants vying for the top 8 spots because only 8 people make their way through to Sunday's action.
Indeed. And the Grand Prix points game throughout the season will culminate in a final. We're more than halfway through. I mean, I can't believe how many weekends we've already had. The top 12 players in the overall Grand Prix standings, Robert, they qualify to the finals.
That's right. And 13 weeks are counted. So we're way past that mark in terms of how many weeks we've had. This is week 17. And no surprise, quite shocking, it must be, about who's at the top. Look at that top 5 there.
Having a hard time reading those names. I've never seen them before atop any kind of standings. Hikaru, Caruana, and Drake. And for the first time, they're experiencing what it's like to be on top of a tournament standing.
The person that we always have to shout, actually, there are 2 of them I see up there, David Paravian and Jose Martinez. I love that they're always participating in these events. They've made 6 knockouts in 6th place and 8th place, and they're overperforming given their FIDE classical ratings.
They definitely are, and they're incredibly good at Rapid. They've got nothing to lose, and they're playing like it. I mean, they're not easy to deal with, and they've delivered quite a few upsets during the Sunday knockout, which is part of the reason why these Sundays are so fun to watch.
They really are. And Saturday is no less fun because we get more competitors as the field gets whittled down for Sunday's knockout. And we see some of them on screen here, right? We have Alexander Kostenyuk in the top left. That's the chess queen to everybody. I see in bottom left, that's Hans Niemann. Ewer points out he's in a new location every single week.
Well, people say that about me. I only have 2 or 3 locations that I stream from. Hans is literally at a different tournament every single RCC, every JSCC match. It's unbelievable, but glad he can join us for this weekend's RCC. And what you're about to see on your screen is a quick thanks to our main sponsor, Coinbase. Let's watch a quick Coinbase video before we jump into the games.
The Rapid Chess Championship is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. You can earn crypto by learning about crypto at Coinbase.com. Explore DeFi and Web3 with your Coinbase wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with your Coinbase card and much, much more. Learn more at Coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. Check them out. Use the command sponsor or command Coinbase today and go to Coinbase.com to get that Bitcoin, baby.
All right. Well, the games are going to begin in 22 seconds as we have a look at the field. Who are those people at the top?
Yeah, Hikaru, that guy, Levon Aroni. I'm always happy to see Levon play. He's got that tactical flair that everyone can appreciate on Draken. Jeffrey Zhang and Arjun Erigaisi, he rounds up the top 5. But right after that, there's still Parham Maksudlu, the big fish, Vladimir Fedoseev. We've got Alexei Serrano, Jose Martinez, and Hrant Malkumian in the top 10. But the games are starting right now. So where do you want to start, Danya?
Well, I think it's a pretty safe bet to start with Hikaru Nakamura. Can't go too wrong with that. And he faces young Turkish Grandmaster Vahap Sanal. Hikaru with the white pieces. Now, Vahap Sanal, very, very dangerous player. He's a noted blitz expert. He's more than capable of delivering some upsets. So not an easy first-round pairing for the world champion, but not just yet. He's got to win the candidates in the match first.
Yeah, no, he he needs to make his way through the gauntlet before we can call him the challenger to Magnus Carlsen. But he, of course, has a good shot, and he has a great shot in any rapid tournament. Down there, we have the double Fianchetto situation from Hikaru. No surprises there. And what do you make of this opening? Because Hikaru's been quite vocal that this opening, it's kind of for fun. It should give Black good play, and it doesn't seem like something he'll choose when the candidates come around.
Well, he also might be saying that, as part of his misdirection campaign. And, considering the kinds of positions that he's gotten and the people that he's gotten them against, I wouldn't necessarily discount a version of this. We might see one knight F3 in the candidates. We might not necessarily see 2B3 and the double Fianchetto. But Hikaru's a big fan of these open-ended, kind of amorphous positions. He's incredibly good at manufacturing advantages out of positions that look completely equal at first glance. And this is exactly one of those types of positions.
Yeah, he's more comfortable. That's what I think it comes down to. And then the move knight to E4 just played after the capture on C4. And knight B1 by Hikaru. He's saying, I just want to kick your knight out. I'll leave more pieces on the board. But I think bishop F6 was a great response from Black.
Yeah, now bishop takes B2 and queen F6 is possible. Vahap can just try to trade everything here. And in the endgame, I think Hikaru might potentially pay the price for that tender pawn on D3. So I'm not enthralled with White's position here by any means.
But I'm guessing you're also not enthralled by this knight on D7, and White is going to think about pushing this pawn up to A5, using it as a battering ram on the queen side. But I think the problem on D3 that you were just highlighting, Danya, that this is really an issue. And so you don't have all the time in the world, even though you want to just push this pawn up the board, because at some point you'll have to watch out for Black teaming up on D3.
And the other thing to understand is that the effectiveness of the move D3, D4 is diminished in the endgame. In the middle game, you often have a queen on E2 that's guarding the C4 pawn. When you play D4 here, the C4 pawn becomes a very serious weakness, which Black can attack with a well-timed rook BC8. So Hikaru's probably going to keep his pawn on D3 as long as he can. And here he goes. You called it A4 and A5 to follow, and Vahap trading bishops, trading the bishop for the knight.
But Danya, what color squares are these? These are dark squares.
Are they light squares? Oh, dark squares.
That's a light square bishop. So I think that decision, a lot of us, and I say us because I don't know if I would have considered bishop takes F3, but would not have traded off our bishop because it's an open board. We often talk about bishops are great compared to knights, but here, look at this knight. Give me those dark squares. A great decision by Vahap Sanal.
And there are threats now, knight b3, and if you play rook ad1, you blunder into knight takes c4, so Hikaru forced to get the rook out of the d file entirely, opening up the door for potential exchange sacrifices on d3, probably premature at the moment, but Turkish Grandmaster handling this quite well as he goes back to c6 and heads toward b4.
Although Hikaru says, I'm going to put my rook on d1 because if you go knight b4, I have rook d2. And you have to be very careful here for Hikaru because you could blunder a pawn at any moment. This is not hanging right now because White has two defenders of this rook on d1. But if you play rook to d2, you mentioned this earlier, after knight takes c4, pawn takes, now you lose in exchange here because the double rooks are too powerful for Black. So that's not going to happen. Hikaru's not going to walk into that blunder, but there's always this tension here and a threat of knight takes c4.
Yeah, and Vahap is basically playing a game of chicken, just daring Hikaru to, to do something drastic. The issue for White is that, he can't really push any of his pawns. E4 is totally unthinkable because it creates a gaping hole on d4. You can push your kingside pawns, g4, g5. Not sure how effective that is. Not sure if Hikaru could even make that happen because Vahap keeps going to a5 and threatening all sorts of things with his knight. And now he stops g4.
And he not only just stopped g4, he may play knight g4 check himself. Because if you have to take on g4, and that's why Hikaru went h3 and then played g4, so he's making sure that he gains space, that this bishop is the key to White's position. You need d3 defended, and that bishop means that this rook on d2, that can go to the h file at some point, and you still have the d3 pawn covered.
Wait a sec. Why did Black stop, going between a5 and c6? Wasn't that leading to a repetition, or did Hikaru somehow find an arrangement of his rooks that discouraged Black from continuing to go to a5 and c6?
I think that he could have gone back and forth. You're correct. This knight with the dual threats of knight b4 and a5, it would have caused Hikaru to freeze. And maybe he's saying, I'm better. It's Hikaru Nakamura, sure, but I'm not afraid.
Possible.
And I'm a little bit afraid now because this knight on e8 is stuck in place. You don't want to allow that knight to f6.
He just He literally allowed the one thing that you can't really allow. Now, rook h1 forces rook h8. You trade, and then you get the other rook to d1. And this is how Hikaru wins games. You make one little sloppy move like that, and, you know, that's it. You know, you don't get a second chance against the guy.
But that was shocking. I mean, it was,
That was
very
a
close.
terrible move.
The knight on e4 was aiming to get to f6. Like, Black played such a good game to that point and then made, I mean, that's just an awful move. And we have a lot of respect for Vahap Sanal as a chess player, but that's just one of those moves where he himself is like,
dude, that's elementary school stuff.
Yeah, you just gave this knight the f6 outpost, and rook h7 doesn't lead to checkmate just yet. The king can escape towards the center, but it's clearly not good for Black to allow all this activity.
Yeah, that's after school chess class stuff. You don't miss that, you know, in the first round of the RCC, and Vahap is going to be kicking himself. He could have gone between a5 and c6. He could have not allowed the knight to f6. He had every chance there to pull out at least a draw in that endgame, but it's Hikaru Nakamura. I mean, he makes you nervous regardless, you know, of what position you're in. And, you know, that's the terror of playing against him. You know that the slightest inaccuracy is going to send you into a tailspin.
Yeah, and the guy makes the knockouts every single week. No real surprise there. But that move, knight d6, that was surprising. Because look at this position. All of a sudden, it went from Black, who had all the fun, to just going back and forth on the queen side, to now White is able to strike down the h-file. And even if this isn't winning, we see the eval bar off to the side down there. It's just clearly better for White. Like, when you think about it from a practical standpoint, if I were playing this game, would I ever want to have Black's position now? No shot.
Totally, yeah. The rook is coming to h7. No problem at all. There's a knight on f6 that I'm never going to kick out. Yeah.
That was a great move, though, rook c8.
Scary.
I actually really, really liked the move. I didn't think about it because I thought rook h7, king f8, rook h8 check, but this knight defends the rook back here, and now it becomes a threat, right? We're trying to remove the guard with this knight on c6 so that we can check and then go try to deliver a checkmate on the back.
Yeah, but if Hikaru wants, he can just sort of enter a holding pattern here. He can go king e2 and just sort of chill and milk Black's clock. On the other hand, you know, Vahap could go rook d8 here and proverbially sort of look up. And the eval bar didn't like king e7, and it was precisely because of this maneuver to e5. And look at how Hikaru, how deftly he handles his knights.
Yeah, this is really wonderful stuff. Rook c6, you take...
No, it takes a knight e5 and knight g6. I mean, Vahap
just,
is just the total meltdown here.
I couldn't even finish my sentence. I was just trying to say, you just take it and you play knight e5, exactly this, and he just lost the pawn, and he's lost the game because that's a very important pawn.
I mean, he's playing this like it's a bullet game, and that was just... Okay, that was really bad defense.
If you want, you can trade rooks because you're up a pawn. Now, I don't think I would do that because we often say the side with the attack wants to keep the queens on the board. But White still has an attack. This king is not necessarily getting checkmate in a couple moves, but it's clearly the one that's in more danger. It's more vulnerable. So why trade rooks? He doesn't. And in fact, he just resigns after knight to e5.
Can you believe they made 45 moves in this game?
No. And how many of those were this situation?
Like
knight
7
going
of
over
them.
here?
Yeah.
Wow, that was a very, very surprising oversight, and Hikaru punishes him and didn't need to be asked twice. Let's go to the game between Eric Hansen and Levon Aronian. This one is now deep into this game, and I thought White was up a pawn, but it's just because Black has all these double pawns.
Yeah, and that probably gives White an advantage. Now, Levon currently has control over the e-file, but there are no infiltration squares. The bishop controls e2, and Eric drops the bishop back to d1. He can play g4 essentially whenever he wants. He doesn't have to rush with that move. And then he can recover control of the e-file with rook e1.
Though g4 is one of those moves that you enjoy kicking the bishop, but then you're like, wait, did I just put my pawn in a vulnerable square? Because we now see very clearly that Levon is aiming for knight f6. And I'm going to be devil's advocate for a second, Danya. We know that White objectively is better, but I don't really see where White's going to crash through. And maybe at some point, like a c5 and a c4 could be kind of dangerous for White to deal with.
Yeah, although even if the pawn reaches c4, you could just sort of not react. And I guess Black could put more pressure with knight d7 to c5, but that's far in the future. And right now, White wants to play, what does White want to play? Knight f3, knight g5 maybe? Nah, but even then there's bishop f7. It's not the end of the world. I see what you're saying.
And now knight f3 would just blunder a pawn. So, right, so he stops knight f3, he stops f5. That was the idea. And somehow these two pawns here, like they're covering all three of these for White.
Yeah. And Eric could consider going g5 to restrict the knight, but that would create a hole on f5. And Levon brings his knight back to f6.
But that move was not approved of. You saw like the eval was starting to go. lower, and he's probably will bring his knight back just to kick this rook out of here.
Taking a page out of a Hobson's book.
Although if this rook lands on g5, maybe that's an acceptable move because the g6 pawn is tender. Although after knight d7, rook is bishop f7, and you've just given up the entire e file, which you might regret.
Yeah, and then the knight could swing over to h7 and trap the rook. So you got to be very careful about these path of no return kind of moves.
Yeah, and Levon, he's looking calm and cool as a cucumber here on camera, and he's played well in the RCC. So he's played 7 events, made the KO, the knockout in 4, but he performs well once he makes it to Sunday.
Yeah, no, he's just so stable, so consistent, and he plays pretty fast even in classical chess. So that kind of style translates incredibly well over to RCC weekends.
Indeed, it does. And bishop f3, just keeping an eye on this pawn on d5. Maybe g5 becomes a threat, although this knight can drop back to d7 to kick this rook off the 5th rank. So it feels like Eric has this pressure aimed at black's position, but there are no breakthroughs. And that's what we were saying from the start. As soon as we tuned in, we like white's pawn structure, but it's kind of like black controls a potential pawn break. And I don't just see how white presses forward from here.
Yeah, and the problem is that you often burn, a minute or two trying to figure out how to make progress, and before you know it, you've got a minute, and then you don't have the time to deal with the transformation once black does play c4. So it's totally a 3-result game, no question about it, and it might be the best strategy for Eric to just offer a draw, or just to go rook e2 and back to e5 and try to force some sort of a repetition.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock here. 5 minutes, 2 seconds for black, now under 3 minutes for Eric, and we know Eric is a fantastic blitz, bullet, all types of players, but there's no increment here. So that 2-minute lead. And let's not forget that Levon is a surprisingly good bullet player, right? People don't think about it because he doesn't play that much bullet, but when he has entered the SCC or even the bullet chess champs of the past, he has proven that he can be very speedy with the mouse.
Oh, absolutely. And now we have a rook trade that's on the horizon, and Eric leaves his rook on e5, so he essentially offers a repetition. Now, Levon probably won't take it because that will give the king, as you're indicating, this very important f4 square, and it will push the knight off of f6.
Right. Although that pawn on e5, it can't be
e5
won
pawn is weak, yeah.
right away, but our point is that once the trade happens, even a pawn that's very far advanced, but the knight comes to e7, the king comes out to e7, and he goes for it. Maybe he actually thinks he's going to get to this pawn at some point.
That's a very bold decision. Let's see how this plays out. Now, Eric could go g5, bishop g4. We're on the same page there, because Levon does have this idea in store of going knight f8 and knight e6, blockading the pawn, and that's exactly what Eric does. And he's now down to 2.5 minutes, and c4 is still possible.
Yeah,
this
I
is
feel
unclear.
like this is a move that you have to play at some point. I think I might hold on to it for a move or two if possible, but c4, you know that Levon really wants to do that. And the point is, how many pieces does white have covering? 3, enough, but you'll end up with isolated pawns over there, and then this knight will be able to go to a square like b6 and start attacking a and c4. So c4 will be available, tactically speaking, for Levon.
Yeah, and I don't know if Levon will ever have conditions that are more conducive to playing c4 than now. So he holds off, he goes knight b6. The issue with that move is that you're not going to be able to get your knight to c5 efficiently now.
Right.
So I'm not sure if this is necessarily the best way to prepare c4. And now the knight can't really go back to d7 without allowing a trade.
And big questions after c4. Oh my gosh, is he going to sack up? No. Oh my goodness. It's a viable threat because you just get an outside pass pawn. I don't think it objectively works, but look at the clock. Eric is going to have to burn time right now thinking, is Levon just trying to get at me over here?
And when you're playing a super GM, all of your fears are greatly amplified, so you're spending longer than you normally would.
Right. And
he's down a minute 55, and he pushes the pawn up to e6.
And that could be a move that leads to a potential win for him because the e5 square is now vacated, though Levon brings his king to d6 to take that away. And Eric's saying, no, I'm getting there. You can't stop me. And now you can't play c4 without dropping d4.
And there's that sacrifice on a4. Here we go.
I love it. And this is the problem for white. Your pieces all ventured away from that queen side. And I think knight e1 is the most tempting move to defend the pawn. But if I just move my bishop back, and I'm not sure where that bishop should go, but I'm going to push this a pawn, and how are you going to stop me?
Well, Eric is going for the counterplay. He wants to take on g6 and potentially push that e-pawn forward to e7. Levon takes another one on c2. He's totally fearless. He thinks his king can handle white's entire army, and it probably can.
Hold up. How are you stopping this a-pawn, right? Like, what move do you make here?
Well, you're not. I think you just have to create counterplay against black's king using your e-pawn. Maybe knight takes g6, and then black can't play a4 there because of e7, and you would want to play bishop a4 in that position to stop the e-pawn.
Let's not forget about this. This b1's also
there's another pass pawn that's also unstoppable.
Bishop takes d3, right? I take because I'm ready to take your knight, which stops your pawn from promoting. So after bishop takes d3, the bishop can go back to b5, and Eric goes knight f7.
And probably back to, he goes king e5, and that was apparently the losing move.
Just play b3. Yeah, how are you going to stop this pawn?
Yeah, you're not even close to fast enough. Knight d6, b2, knight c8 check.
Yeah, and then you just go king e8, I guess.
And black promotes.
Yeah, black is winning this game, and that means there was one move and one thing we can wait for Eric likely to lose this game shortly because he doesn't have much time and the position is lost. But I think we should try to figure out what it was, because it's a difficult position even for us, right? To say how was that equal? There must have been one and only one, not just move, but a string of moves that led to some kind of draw and a forced repetition or something. Wow.
Knight d8.
King takes king d6 and e7. So do not take that knight.
He's not falling for that ever.
No.
Vaughn is like, I'm not even thinking about taking that knight.
He was like, it is a gift, or is it a Trojan horse? And so he doesn't go for it. And knight c6 check, the king goes back to e8. There's no follow-up. b1 equals queen is going to happen.
And queen b7 is very important at the end of the line, by the way. Only move.
Yes, that's true, because you need to stop bishop d7 check, and the queen comes back, stops that check, and that should be game. By the way, bishop a4 might also be a good move. So you can just take this knight and then get this pawn.
Yep, and he plays it, and he goes for the safe option, and that's going to end the game. And by the way, that decision to play knight b6 with the idea of bishop e8 and knight takes a4, that was found in 10 seconds. How brilliant was that? That was the game-winning idea.
Absolutely. You don't force the issue, which gives him trades, which may liquidate and allow an easier draw. He was up on the time. So he goes here, takes, knight e5, bishop c2, and knight f7. So what in the world is the solution here? Because it looks like, I'm cheating. Every move loses except for knight e5. And after b3, knight c6 check. Oh, not knight c6. Knight takes g6, I guess. I'm going the wrong direction here, stepping the wrong way. But this king goes back to e8. And then you push your h-pawn. Okay, come on.
Oh, my God. And you allow promotion because the h-pawn is going to be unstoppable. It's not that black's not going to have checks. He's going to have checks, but he doesn't have any checks that fork the h-pawn.
Yeah, and if you leave it, then you can't stop this one. And if you take, this is ridiculous. Are you kidding me? That you get to this position, as you said, there are checks on c1, on f1, but the point is you can shield your king, and then you're going to queen and then be able to take back. And that's not even the end of the story, because there's another outside
There's another passer. And then there's a battle between the e-pawn and the a-pawn, but that is the battle white wins, because now his pieces are very well positioned. You get the king up to d6, the bishop to h5, and you promote essentially with checkmate.
Yeah, I'm just going to show.
And having seen that, Levon still decided to go for the line.
Like, look at this. You go knight f4, and that's how you win. Because
queen h1, bishop h5.
Counter check, and then you get a... This is an absurd variation. I'm glad we were able to show everybody, but that's how, deep chess can be, where you have, not, like I said, not just one move, it's a string of moves that seem very counterintuitive. So that game went Levon's way when all is said and done. So let's see.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
Very elementary. Let's go to Alexander Rustemov against Daniil Dubov. And I'm glad we tuned in with Dubov at under 8 seconds remaining. And this is a king.
Oh, he didn't give a check.
It was mate in one.
Sasha Rustemov. Look at him go.
He can't be stopped sometimes. And didn't give a check, so the king was safe over here on a5. Let's go to the other remaining games. Hrant Melkumyan here with the black piece taking on Barath Subramaniam. And 3 seconds for black, just flag the guy.
Yeah, this is okay. There isn't even a mate threat. You can literally do anything you want. And white just made a losing move, which was kind of funny. Oh, king e6, Robert, I think is almost winning for black, because now there's a mate threat.
Wow, that's actually kind of wild. Oh my gosh, because you're getting mated with rook c4, and if you move your rook anywhere, there's rook c3, and now I threaten this mate. And if you go rook
you just take a3.
You just take the pawn, and then you take this, and then go rook e3 check, and then promote your pawn.
That's hilarious, but it didn't. It's a total moot point, obviously. And some of the favorites, some of the strong GMs are getting slayed here in round one.
They are indeed. But Hikaru Nakamura, Levon Aronian, Dimitri Andreikin, Arjun Erigaisi, they made it through unscathed.
As did Jeffrey Zhang, Alexei Matlikov, Alexander Bortnik, the usual suspects. And we are ready for game 2.
I am excited. I mean, if that was just round 1, I'm so looking forward to what's in store for us, because that Levon Aronian, Eric Hansen ending, and I know there's so many people out there like, end games are boring. I don't want to study my end games. That end game was awesome, right? There was a peace sacrifice. There was promotion, and then somebody else not even promoting, but an H-pawn running wild, and you couldn't stop it. So this has been a fun first round, and we have Bortnik against Nakamura.
A classic matchup by now. And just to your point about end games, the most beautiful end games are those in which the game continuation was really fun, but a lot of it remains behind the scenes. Yes. And is left for post-game analysis. To me, that's almost like the cherry on top.
And don't worry, Danya, I read all of your columns in Chess Life magazine with your beautiful endgame studies. So you've uncovered so many awesome endgame ideas, and maybe there's more in store for your endgame series.
Wow, you're very complimentary this morning.
Yes, indeed. Well, Hikaru plays G6. He wants to fiend Kelly's bishop. This is not a free pawn on E5 after bishop takes D6. It's a sort of a basic idea in many different Spanish positions, whether it's A6 or G6, that if you think you're getting a free pawn on E5, Black puts his queen on D4 to attack the knight and to attack this pawn E4, so you win your pawn right back and get the bishop pair.
Exactly. And I think this is known as the Smyslov variation. And, Bortnik is a notorious time trouble junkie. I don't know if he can afford to spend a minute on, what is this, move 4?
Yeah, what is he doing? Bortnik, you don't have increment here. You're playing Hikaru Nakamura. It's the 4th move of the game. Let's go. Just make some move, right?
C3, D3. I mean, there's 3 or 4 reputable lines. Most of them start with C3 and D4. I don't really know any setups that don't involve those very typical Ruy Lopez moves.
What's he doing?
And he finally plays C3. That was like 75 seconds.
You realize that you're playing Hikaru Nakamura. He can spot you a minute. You can't really spot him a minute at this point in the game. And now he's thinking again.
He can spot you 7 minutes.
What's he doing? No, seriously, what is he doing right now? Somebody give me
Bishop
Bortnik's
takes
number.
C6 is a fashionable move here. In the last couple of years, people have been taking that knight and then going D4.
Right.
But Jesus, it's like telling the waitress, give me 3 more minutes and then give me 5 more minutes. Give me 10 more minutes. You're never ordering the food and the restaurant is closed already.
Make up your mind. And we have so much respect for Bortnik, but this is just odd. Are we sure he's like even at his computer? Doesn't he have a kid that sometimes runs on screen during?
Yeah, he does.
So
and maybe I think he might have a pet too that maybe jumped on the keyboard or something.
Yeah,
or is hijacking the mouse.
But again, it's another time. Okay, we gotta go to a different game. Yeah, I can't look at this anymore. Come on.
No, I can't either.
He's playing like I do in Blitz chess, where I dilly-dally forever and then I just lose on time. So hit strike in the center. That's the good news. The bad news is he spent forever just to get here, and this is a known sort of setup for Hikaru. So let's move on, I think, to maybe Jeffrey Zhang versus Rasmus Svane. That seems like a pretty good
sounds good to me.
Tune into and same reaction.
The Peruvian variation strikes again.
You have the bishop pair for white, but black has the healthier pawn structure because of these double pawns over here. And I think the hard part about this position for black is you don't really know exactly what to do. Like I want to play c4 to kick your bishop, but that makes the only dark square bishop on the board good. And now there's a fight for the b file, and maybe there's like a rook b6, Danya. Could that be what Rasmus is going to look for to double up on b8?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a very fragile situation. That queen, by the way, has a lot of responsibilities, and he does play c4, and that kind of surprises me. And I think he's got a very concrete idea, Robert. The point is that after the bishop moves away, let's say bishop f1, he might want to play knight e4, and I'm just thinking that there could be some forks on d2. If white goes bishop d4 in that position, maybe black wants to take and go knight 2. But even there, at the end of the line, there's queen g3 threatening mate on g7. So
right, you think you're getting this fork and you're winning material, and as you said, queen g3 says nope, not so fast. There's a checkmate threat. And actually, Danya, a very big threat is bishop takes h6. Like if that move hadn't been played, there was like rook takes b8 and bishop takes h6.
Oh, great catch.
Because of the check to the king and the check to the rook at the same time. So after bishop f1, rook takes b8, bishop takes h6 becomes a big threat.
That's a great catch. I saw bishop takes h6 in the event that the black queen would move, with the idea of softening up the f6 knight. But it was a threat even with the queen on e7, and Jeffrey decides not to retreat his bishop, instead moving it up to f5. What do you make of that?
If black takes, I completely think it's justified because you'll end up playing bishop d4 and go for this d5 pawn. But if black leaves the bishop here, do you really want to take it to give this pawn a new square on e6 and then have a pawn chain rather than a big pawn on e6?
So we'll see if this backfires or if this succeeds. Yeah, if white can get a bishop versus knight situation and stick his bishop on d4, you've got a positional dream, and that d5 pawn is going to be weak for the rest of the game. So Jeffrey, I mean, he's got to be pretty happy here.
Yeah, no, he has any clearer prospects in the position. I don't even see an easy move for Rasmus. Rook b6 no longer available because the bishop is open to that square, and that means you can't double along the b file. And at some point, white can still bring this queen to the diagonal just to take control of the b file. There's e file is also open, but there are a lot of pieces in the way. The b file is the fully open file here, so if white can get that file, it looks good. However, at some point, this queen may land on a3 and start attacking these weak white pawns.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up Jeffrey's camera if we can, because I heard that he moonlights as a lighting expert. Perfect lighting on his camera there.
Well, we know he commentates as well as plays, so he's just working on his craft day in and day out. So we'll see if he's able to score a victory in this game and instead of commentate, play in a Sunday knockout. So let's move on from this game just because it seems like Rasmus is thinking. Let's give Benjamin Bach some love, because Benjamin and I commentated last week together for the Sunday knockout. And what is happening here, Danya? I see a bishop pair. I see a queen on d4. Is white down a pawn, but with the bishop pair?
And Alexei has more time than Bortnik does, and it's move 26.
What do you make of the objective? I mean, we see the zeros, but we can ignore that for the moment. Well, if you were playing this game, which color would you prefer to have?
It's hard to say. At first, I thought rook a6 was terribly strong. Then I realized black has a check on b1. And if the king moves to h2, there's a very pretty geometric sequence, queen b1 to h7. Mm-hmm. And the king is forced to retreat back to g1. So you could get a repetition that way.
Wow.
In terms of the pawn count, black is up a pawn. The downside, of course, for black is that the knight on b6, it's really passive. It's just sort of tied down to the d5 pawn. And white could also make a relatively neutral move, such as, I don't really know how white can improve. See, that's the problem. White's position looks very nice with those two bishops and the queen centralized. But how do you actually improve given that queen b1 is a threat? And there's our answer.
Wow, that is a big decision that, if you just scroll through the game, you say, all right, that move looks fine, you're protecting your pawn. But he could have played that rook a6 move, as you were saying, and softened up the protection of d5 and maybe encouraged, and in some ways potentially forced, a repetition like this. Instead, he says, I'm going to play for more. But you might be playing for less because you are down a pawn if you are Alexei Sarana. And what if black starts pushing the pawns over here on the queen side?
I think he absolutely should, and he pushes his pawns on the king side.
Whoa! F5? I was not expecting that.
Neither was I. I didn't even know that was possible. And the point is that you can't en passant because the rook on e1 hangs, and that's a very important tactical point. Now, white can take on d5 with check now, which would discourage most of us from going f5, but Benjamin has calculated one step ahead. I think he wants to take and then just block the check with a queen on e6 and then push that pawn up to f4 and shut white's bishop down.
Wow, what a variation. I mean, seriously, f5 did not cross my mind. As you said, I didn't even think it was legal. I would never think about f5 because it gives a pawn with check, but that's what strong players do. They buck the trends. They think, oh, you could take my pawn with check, maybe even win a second pawn over here. But if I get this pawn up to f4, your bishop will be stuck on h2. You're not going to enjoy the prospect of that piece.
Right. And I don't know if Alexei has a choice, because if you don't take on d5, then black can still play f4.
Yeah, as you said, queen e6, just defend that.
And he doesn't take on d5.
He is so focused on playing for a win, it feels like.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And what if queen e6 is played? You protect this pawn. You can play g4 at some point to kick this bishop away. Or still after queen 6, f4 to go after this pawn.
I think he wants queen e6, rook a1, and then he wants to go back to a6. If I understand him correctly. Because bishop takes e5 there isn't really possible because you're going to drop the knight on b6.
Yeah, you're saying the queen is a bit overloaded, tending to the knight on b6.
Right. Now, no question that white is worse here objectively, but Alexei is just unbelievably self-confident, and that has served him very well in the RCC. I mean, these risky decisions have paid off.
Here's one line. So let's say I go queen e6, you play rook a1, and I play f4.
Okay.
And you're like, oh, I'm going to go pin and win your knight. And then I go queen takes e5, and I have checkmate down here because your bishop takes away the king's escape square.
That's a great point.
You know, have
There's
my
not
knight.
much that white can do about that.
Enjoy that knight there because it's good knight after a piece lands on e1.
Mm-hmm. And enjoy that bishop on h2. It's really getting out sometime soon.
Yeah, that's a problematic piece. And Benjamin plays queen e6. And I mean, it's just good for black. This is a pawn that might fall soon. This knight, once you take care of the d5 pawn, let's say you go g4, the knight can also go to d7 or even up to a4. And I'm not buying this at all. I think Alexei's so focused on the result that he's kind of letting his position get away from him.
Well, in light of the line you just showed, I'm almost surprised that it's only plus 0.8 or whatever.
Yeah, actually, maybe there's like a bishop h5?
And then f4 or something?
I think there's g4 at the end. Your bishop might get trapped over here.
Both bishops are trapped.
Yeah. Oh, he goes for it.
As we speak about it.
Do you need to keep the rook on the e file? Can black say, I want the a file?
Well, that depends on whether you're aiming for the e5 pawn, and Benjamin does keep it on the e file, and now Alexei worms his queen up to c5.
Mm-hmm. And now the question is, f4, is it g4 and queen h6?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you play f4, are you actually aiming to take on e5? Maybe Alexei wants Benjamin to take that and open up another line of communication between the rook and the queen.
I'm taking that.
Yeah, me too.
I think you can grab it because this bishop is so locked out here on h2 that it feels like it's shut down. Yeah, you're pinned, but you have all your pieces in a row defending it. So I'm taking this position for Benjamin, and I think that he's in great shape, but not on the clock. That's his biggest problem.
Yeah, no, I had the same exact thought as we're babbling about the position. His clock's starting to dip, now down to 3.5 minutes. So we'll keep an eye on this game as it enters its denouement. But back to the Hikaru game for a second.
Let's do that because I see that files are open and there's a pawn down on b2. And look at the clock, Danya. I mean, it's already winning apparently for Hikaru over the board. But even if it weren't, and even if he doesn't smoothly convert this game, there's a pawn on b2 and white has 1:39 seconds to figure it out.
And white is an incredibly weak king. And as we often like to point out, opposite colored bishops in the middle game, they favor the attacker.
Right. And it would seem like white's attack, and actually Hikaru missteps with queen to c7. So that was inaccuracy. And rook b1, a mistake in return. And they're both...
And a mistake in return. And this position's impossible to play because the engine just gives these random moves like king g1. I mean, who's going to play that?
Maybe he'll play it now.
But I mean, Hikaru's just playing for the clock, though. And rightly so. And Bortnik just blundered the a-pawn.
Yeah, now it's game. So the problem is you push a pawn thinking, hey, I'm going to advance. I'm going to distract black's pieces. Black's rook is happily distracted here because there's no way for white to protect on a dark square.
Well,
the bishop can't, protect the pawn like a knight can.
There's a very important subtlety here, though. If white goes queen b6, that would have been a saving grace. After rook takes a5, you're like, oh, I win the b2 pawn.
Oh, my goodness.
But what did I say about those opposite colored bishops and dark square control? And
oh, my gosh.
Rank checkmate.
So that's why king g1 was so important.
Yep. It actually was a way of creating Luft.
Oh my gosh. And king g1 has been played now, but it's a little bit too late when it seems like white can...
short and 8 days late. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just a free pawn. And white actually is still up a pawn if my math is serving me correctly, and it is. But unfortunately for Bortnik, he's got pawns that can't move, and this is the best pawn on the board, down on b2.
Yeah, and it's just anchored by the bishop. And you can't really sack on b2 because your king is way too weak to sustain an exchange sack like that. Nah, I mean, Hikaru can just win this through a war of attrition, or he can go after white's king with queen a5, as you're pointing out.
And a big problem is that if this trade happens on b1, there's queen d2 check, and his king isn't that safe regardless. So c7, I think that's a move that looks like it might distract black's pieces, because if you take with the bishop on c7, then you lose this b2 pawn, and maybe that gives white some hope. But after c7, there's just rook takes b1, because if you go in queen, yes, I have 2 queens on the board. then you're welcoming this queen into E1. Okay, we might just see this.
This is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. We're going to see it happen. Queen E1, queen G3, rook E1, queen takes E3, and
wow, Hikaru is going to pre-move. Yeah. Wow. Oh my God.
He's going to B1 equals queen.
He's going to pre-move B1.
He's got this. Done.
Yep. Bishop B3. Both sides of two queens of the. Wait a minute.
What? There is a threat here.
Queen D3 check.
It's not even really a threat, right? Like the king.
Oh yeah, the king does escape. If the pawn were on H4, we'd be having a different conversation.
Right, because queen G8, king here, queen H8 would be checkmate if this pawn were on H4, taking away the escape square. Bishop F6.
Do you think black has enough material to give checkmate?
Do you think? Well, my question would be: do you think Hikaru would deliver checkmate immediately, or give back one of his queens and then checkmate the next turn?
Or maybe he'd find a way to give back both of his queens and just mate with a rook. I mean, knowing Hikaru, there's probably a way like that exists. Whoa! Jeffrey's gonna win.
Yeah. Isn't G4 checkmate?
This looks like a very one-sided position in comparison to what we had previously.
And resignations. How did this happen? Like, in not too many moves, it looks like way back when. Oh, I can't get there, but way back when, it looks like it was a capture on F5. So then the knight ventured out, but it got himself in trouble, and the position sort of collapsed for black. We maybe will look at that later. So let's check. What in the world?
Sinan against Jaspem. And the position is very, very close here.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around this position. There's so many pieces on dark squares in this game. And then there also is a huge pawn chain on the
light squares.
So
there's a king on a light square.
Pawns on light squares, pieces on dark squares. That's how this game is going.
Yeah, I mean, what's your point? How does that help us advance our understanding of the position?
I'm waiting for you to help us understand.
Well, now the pawn is on a dark square, and I think Jose is trying to induce weaknesses in the long diagonal with H3. That's a very double-sided move, because white could take that pawn, and then black's king could be the one caught in the crossfire.
So, all right, so look at the clock situation. You're an amazing blitz player. Now you're looking at a position where both sides down a minute 50, a minute 40 for black. Who are you taking?
I am taking... it's a very good question. I'm probably taking white, actually.
Okay.
Because I feel like what's going to happen is black is eventually going to push a pawn on the king side. White has a bunch of exchange sacrifices. He could sack that rook for the knight. And somehow I'm getting the feeling that when push will come to shove and when we'll see the time scrambled and both sides will be under a minute, somehow it's going to be black's king that's going to end up, caught under enemy fire. I don't know why, but I'm getting that intuition.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
we'll see. Maybe it'll just end in a draw also.
I don't think so. I think one of those players is going to look at the clock at some moment and be like, I'm going to flag you. And it's usually Jose doing the flagging, but Shugirov is an amazing speechless player himself.
He's super fast. I mean, I've played him in a bunch of Title Tuesday games. He doesn't just lose on time for no reason.
Yeah, he's real good. So he's also nearly 2,700 FIDE. And what is happening here? So it's still locked up. You keep mentioning an exchange sack. There was always this possibility to take on E4, and I would have gone for that.
And there's also the possibility of queenside expansion. You can go A3, B4, and as I speak, he does just that, and Jose discourages him by pressuring the C4 pawn, but Sinan reinforces the threat. And that expansion could get really scary if a pawn reaches C5. You could have breakthroughs and that knight getting to C7. I mean, this is what I'm talking about.
And maybe there's like a quick queen maneuver. What is?
Whoa!
What's happening?
He couldn't take twice because knight takes F4.
Okay. So knight A7, is that... Oh, it doesn't trap the rook because the rook can go back to C5 as we were just looking at. What is happening?
Okay, so now black's knight is trying to get to E4. Now it's getting back to G8. The knights are jumping around all over the board.
Yeah, this position is incredibly locked up, and the advantages are swinging like within a +1, -1 sort of framework, and it looks good for white to my eyes.
Yeah, it feels like white's making more progress than black, and Jose plays G3 to create the preconditions for a back rank mate. He should probably get that rook out of G6, and he does. Uh-oh. King G6, and now the knight can't really move away from B5. Now I feel like it's black who has the upper hand.
What a move by King G6, taking away the F6 square from the white queen.
Jose is just so good. It's unbelievable how he turns these
Oh,
games
90
around.
97.
Or
Fork City.
has he? Knight C7, and there's an exchange sack.
It's about time. And now this pawn is there?
Oh,
Oh
Rook
gosh,
G8 is a mate threat.
is it?
How do you
there's
stop that?
King H5, E5. Let's don't take there. There's a back rank mate.
Oh, that forces a rook trade. That's a big one.
But it's not even clear that white is better after the rook trade
Nope.
because you take with the pawn and your king comes out.
That knight is a hero, and white has to trade, and we're gonna have an old school time scramble here.
Yeah, if there's F3, you just take with the pawn and king can block, and now king can also gives up a pawn.
Apparently, there was a better move there. Now this should be a draw objectively, but I'm probably taking the knight in this situation.
Yeah, it's a very tricky piece.
Although this might just be a repetition.
Well, king E2, play king E2. Oh, not anymore.
Jose
obviously.
going for it.
Oh gosh, knight F4. There's rook A3 check.
Uh-oh. Forcing the king back. King G2.
Mm-hmm.
Another repetition is
Oh,
possible.
rook A4. Give me the
You
pawn.
lost the pawn.
And you're losing both in a row. That means that
he's
white
gonna
can't lose.
lose.
Yeah,
You could just take G3.
done. And flag
But
him.
he's going to miss a fork.
He's just flag him. That's what I would go for if I were Shiguro.
Oh,
Take it.
take it.
And
Take
keep-
it.
Oh, go
Rook
back
G4
and take it.
it.
H6.
I mean, this is easy.
And I'm looking at the clock, and Jose's actually the one down on time, and the king goes up to G7, and that knight's trapped. So this is easy, yeah.
Yeah, it's a ladder mate. And you actually prefer to have rook and queen here because there's no stalemate possibility as opposed to two queens.
And that is Shigurov taking that one. He beats the Peruvian legend, Jose Martinez, and that's great news for Shannon. He's a very strong player, and we just saw him outclass Jose Martinez down the stretch of a time scramble.
Yeah, it was a 116 move game, and it's not easy to beat Jose in those kinds of circumstances.
Yes, and we're getting questions from the chat. They're not quite about this event, but I'm happy to answer it anyway. The question is about the Norway chess and what we think of Vishy's performance in it. And what Vishy's performance has been awesome. I think that people think because Vishy doesn't play for a while, he's retired, he won't be able to perform at the level that he used to. Yeah, maybe he's not the world champion Vishy anymore, but when he plays in a tournament, he is somebody who can win the event no matter if Magnus Carlsen is playing or not. So, Daniel, what do you make of what we've seen from Vishy in Norway and also the Grand Chess Tour?
Here's the thing. I think for some reason the chess community, as round 3 kicks off here with Hikaru playing Serrana, I think the chess community is really obsessed with trying to detect when a chess player enters their period of decline. This was happening during COVID when Magnus had a couple of subpar performances in online events. This happens with Vishy when he turned 50. This happens with Veselin. And I just think you got to realize class doesn't die a fast death. Vishy might be getting up there in age, but he's still in great physical form. He spends time, he follows all of the games. He still trains. He trains with some of India's top talents, and I'm sure that benefits him as well. And, I'm really, really happy that he's having an amazing event, but I'm not quite as surprised as I think some people are. Vishy is still freaking Vishy.
Yes. Vishy is Vishy. I like to say that about people. And Hikaru is Hikaru, but his position is not looking great. And it looks like Alexei has come prepared. So we see a position that is quite closed right now. The dark square bishops were traded. This pawn on e6, enough to defend. And at some point, watch out for d takes c4, because if black can open up the position, all of a sudden that bishop is alive and well and causing white some issues.
Yeah, and a lot of dynamic potential here in the center. e6, e5 is going to come at some point. This almost looks like a same-ish Nimzo Indian with colors reversed. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly. With F3, yeah, is exact structure.
Yep, you got it. And take over for 5 seconds with beeping that's driving me crazy.
Okay, well,
7 seconds.
I think the beep is that the pawn on e6 is frozen. So let's move forward in traffic here and push the pawn up to e5. It's what the best move seems to be, because you have a knight, pawn, queen, all defending the square. So after e5 takes, pawn takes, you also have d5 defended enough time. So you can just get 2 pawns in the center. And Daniel, we call c5 and d5 pawns hanging pawns. What are pawns on e5 and d5 called? I don't know if there's a name for it.
Center pawns?
Right, but if there's only 2 of them and no bishop pawns.
Hanging center pawns?
We'll have to come up with a good name for it.
I feel like you're looking for some sort of incredibly creative, convoluted name, and I'm just giving you,
yeah, you're giving me like the obvious, like literal thing of what they are, but you're like a chess historian. I feel like if, I don't know, Boголubov said something, you would have the knowledge of the quote and what it might be called.
I'm like, in sixth grade, all my classmates were into those anti-jokes, like why did the plane crash? Because the pilot was a loaf of bread, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So what did the two lawyers say to each other when they met? We're both lawyers. And we have that pawn center.
We do have the pawn center. I'm going to ignore all of your anti-jokes that you just made. Do not take this knight. You lose your queen. That pawn is pinned. So the question becomes, just like with hanging pawns, are these pawns strengths or weaknesses? And why they could become weaknesses is that there are already a ton of white pieces staring at them. Why their strength is pawns in the middle of the board, especially with many pieces available, are good because they limit the scope of remaining pieces, right? This pawn e5 takes away the d4 square. Now on e4, it threatens the knight on f3, which is where it wants to be, and it's trying to open up this f file.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very scary situation for White's king. And one of the beautiful things about chess is the notion that something can be both a strength and a weakness. Just if you isolate that concept and consider it, there's a certain depth and beauty that stems from that concept. It lends a tremendous degree of complexity to the game.
Right. And now I think with these pawns established, the pawn d5 is safe. This knight coming to f4, and watch out for like a queen g5. And it's not just about maybe knight d3 if you move this knight. Queen g5 is going to be a vicious threat with not just queen takes g2 mate, but knight h3 and barreling down the f file.
So maybe White should put a queen on g4 preemptively.
And I'm wondering if the bishop can slide back to c8 and rook coming to f6, and maybe there's going to be a sack over here. It's kind of
iffy. Yeah, no, this is terrifying. But okay, rook e3 by Hikaru. So he does something similar. He wants to slide the rook over to g3, but queen g5, rook g3. Oh, there's no knight e2. Sorry, there's a knight on d4 controlling that square.
Oh, but I will show that, because if this knight were not here, that's a really, really cool tactic. And that's what I love, is when, even if it doesn't work, we'll show why it's a blunder here, because the knight can take back. But you need to keep these ideas in the back of your mind, because if this knight had gone to b5 and the queen had to take, you lose this rook on c1. So it's good that you pointed out this possibility, because maybe there's a situation where that knight does move away from d4. But rook f6 was Alexi's choice. That was actually a huge mistake, according to the eval bar. It was -2. Looks like maybe just rook to c8, and that was the better try. And I'm wondering if it was, oh my gosh, because of queen g5 to follow. Like rook c8, knight takes b7, and because of these tactics revolving around the c1 square,
knight h3.
Yeah, you have in this position rook takes c1, and instead of knight e2, in which the knight takes and protects the queen, you have knight h3 check, and you uncork this diagonal threat, and you win the queen on c1. So rook c8 was a devilish move.
That's pretty impressive. But in response to rook a8, I thought White would be likelier to play b4 to try to cement that knight on c5. In any case, that ship has sailed. After rook f6, Hikaru brings his knight back to e2, trying to take care of Black's strongest piece.
Yeah, he's removing this knight on f4, which is causing all the problems. And I could understand being tempted and taking on g2 and bringing a rook to f8 and just trying to get to this f2 pawn. But I'm not sure that you get quite enough for your sacrifice piece.
Yeah, and that stuff tends to not work against Hikaru. I mean, he's just such an accurate defender. He also has 7 minutes and 40 seconds on his clock. And to put time pressure on Alexei Sarana, who does that himself, is pretty impressive.
Yeah, Sarana, I mean, that guy is extremely well prepared and always just blitzing out his openings. But knight e2
and
now.
His middle games.
His middle games, his end games. Yeah. And it doesn't matter where he is playing quickly. I'm worried about his d5 pawn now. Right? We're talking about the strength of the pawns in the center. Now turning around to be a weakness. Once this knight leaves, then essentially this bishop is going to be taken and a rook coming to c5 and things like that. And this center could just collapse.
Yeah, positionally, White is just totally winning. And Black has to get something going down the FL. If he doesn't, Hikaru's going to plant a queen on d4, play b3, b4, secure the knight, and you're never going to hear the end of it.
Queen d4 looks like a good move, although that might run into some kind of tactics, because you have to watch out with this being loose down here.
No, I would just play b4.
Mm-hmm. Very nicely done. And I'm starting to like Hikaru's chances. I just
a5, a3. I mean,
this move, queen e5, looks good, and then you realize there's a knight fork with knight d7.
No, I just don't see any way. I think you might have to sack on g2 and go rook af8. I just don't see any other ways to. Maybe that's. I guess that's too drastic. I mean, the engine's still giving total equality, but it certainly doesn't feel equal anymore. It feels like Black's initiative is fizzling out at a very rapid pace here.
And one reason we really don't want to take on E2 is it brings a defender of F2. So maybe, because I don't want to trade knights either, and he plays rook F8, so I guess he's okay with it. But I was thinking at some point, maybe this knight can just move out the way, and then you double up and go for the F2 pawn.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because the knight can act as kind of a chisel, moving from G6 to E5 to G4. Knights are very good in these types of positions where they have to exploit individual weak squares. Now Black is left without a knight, and he basically has to rely exclusively on his major pieces to make progress down the F file. And I don't know if that constitutes enough firepower. But wait a second, Queen F7.
That
Queen
looks
F7
like a lot of
and D5, D4 could come at the most inconvenient moment for White.
That's huge, because after Queen F7, you may think, I take this bishop so the queen gets distracted, but no. Black is just going to take on F2 here because this king is being quickly hunted. So Queen F7, you don't have time to distract the queen, which means you need to bring a piece to defend this. How do you do that? You either bring your rook back, which doesn't look so great, or you move your queen. But if your queen moves, then as you point out, D4 is available. And
oh, that's a huge miss for Alexei.
King H8.
Way too reticent.
I'm just also trying to understand, like, what does that do for him?
Well, he's playing prophylactically and slowly. I just didn't think I don't think he recognized how powerful Queen F7 is here, because the threat against F2 looks really banal. It looks easy to defend against, but once you realize that that D-pawn can add a tremendous amount of strength by advancing to D4, you begin to appreciate how strong the pressure down the F-file actually is.
Yeah, no, that looks overwhelming, but I'm just trying to understand, what does Black gain from having the king on H8? It's not like there was any pressure along the diagonal that you were afraid of, so why did the king go to H8?
Well, I still think Queen F7 should be played. It doesn't have the same luster as before, but Alexei doesn't even consider it. I mean, he just goes bishop C6.
I'm not getting a good sense of his play right now, right? It just feels like he's all over the place. He's scattered, and now he's also down 2 minutes, and White controls many of the important squares. So I'm not liking how this game is going for Alexei. I think he's in some serious trouble, despite the eval bar saying it's, just about plus 0.8, whatever it may be. I just think that White has just strategic control of this game on the dark squares, and this bishop has nothing to attack.
Yeah, and he had his chances this game. I mean, great opening preparation. Probably could have played more accurately in the early middle game, and then he had a golden opportunity with Queen F7.
And also, we shouldn't discount the possibility that knight takes E4 at some moment could be an idea, but knight takes E4 now runs right into bishop A4 with a pin.
Yeah, so a move like Queen D4 can be considered, or something more prophylactically minded. I don't know how exactly Hikaru could secure that F2 pawn in a better way, but he's got options here, and I agree with you. I think this is going downhill for Alexei. B5.
Yeah, I was just actually thinking about that, and I was drawing arrows to it. He's distracting the bishop because if D5 falls, so will E4. These hanging central pawns will start hanging one by one, and then White is just well ahead. So yeah, I'm not liking this position for Alexei. If he has to go back to A8 or something, he is clearly the worst minor piece. The light squares are not doing anything for him, and the dark squares are definitely doing something for Hikaru.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on this game as it continues to unravel for Alexei. On board 2, we have Jeffrey against Noterbeck. Big matchup there, and looks like another win for Jeffrey.
You know what we just saw yesterday? We saw Anish Giri take 2 rooks from Magnus Carlsen's queen and lose the game. Right now, Noterbeck has 2 rooks and seemingly has some pressure against this black king. But what we're seeing based on the eval bar, and also with the positioning of the queen and the knight, is that it's the white king that's in trouble. You may think, I could play knight E8. I'm just going to show that very quickly. That knight E8, I'm going to go for this pawn G7. But there's always was a queen D5, because black's checkmate attack is there. White just has a single check on G7. And if you play F3, the only way to stop it, this queen takes on A2. And once that happens, you're not stopping me from mating you or just winning your rook.
Yeah, your rooks are disjointed, your king is weak, your knight is ineffective, and black's king is surrounded by, an incredibly effective pawn cocoon. So Noterbeck has to bring everything back. But rook E1, and Jeffrey clearly missed this move.
You know what he missed?
Knight takes F6.
Exactly, it's mate. He thought that he was delivering checkmate. Oh my gosh.
Completely new game now.
Yeah, queen G4, not just defending the mate by going knight G3, knight F6. with a fork, by the way. Pawn takes rook e7, king goes up, and rook h8 check it. You mentioned this earlier, Danya. The pawn on h4, taking away escape squares. It's essential when you're attacking.
Yeah, Bortnik would have loved a pawn like that. And Noterbeck has one. And Jeffrey has let his entire advantage evaporate in the span of 2 moves.
And now knight takes f6 is a huge threat. If
you have
not,
to play knight d5, I think.
Just knight back. What a sad type of move. And you're not even threatening queen takes e8 because knight g5 check is there. So white has time to make other moves. And hello, 2 rooks on the 8th rank. We were just talking about how black had the attack. Now it's white's turn, and it's looking dangerous for Jeffrey.
And another scary thing is that if black ever plays g5 to create an escape square on g6, white can meet that with h5. And even if black's queen captures on h5, that puts the queen and the king in an alignment. And if you have a rook on e8, you can deliver a pin on h8. And Jeffrey takes on b4, and apparently that's the losing move. And I think it's because of knight c5 and rook e8.
Yikes. He goes knight. Oh,
I guess that wasn't the move.
Oh my gosh. Wait a second.
Why not?
There's some checks here. So there's, he goes, just goes.
h5, queen d1. And
you
take the pawn with check.
Oh my goodness, Danya. Now I understand why knight c5 was wrong. The knight needed to be on g3. But okay, that is ridiculous. And that is so counterintuitive. It's so unhuman-like to retreat rather than go for the direct attack of the queen and then go for the checkmate, right? Everything came with tempo, and yet it was going in the wrong direction because Jeffrey found a way to escape with his king. This knight is actually hanging tactically, and if you play h5, which is the point you made, it would fall with check.
Well, what Noterbeck failed to realize is that after knight g3, you actually can't stop rook e8. So you don't need to play with tempo. But resisting that is, I mean, that is an impulse that is virtually impossible to resist, especially in time pressure. Incredible defense here by Jeffrey, and he still has to finish the job, and it's still incredibly dangerous with white's rooks doubled on the 8th rank like that.
But just showing that position quickly, as you're saying, you could not stop rook e8, and you point out g5 is always met by h5, yet this king is locked in here, and it's going to be checkmated. So huge missed chance there by Noterbeck. I don't blame him at all. I mean, knight c5, it's like so obvious. You're attacking the queen.
Such a natural move.
You're going for the exact checkmate we're talking about, and yet it's wrong because if you had h5, your queen d1 is check, king h2, queen takes h5 is check. You don't get rook h8 counter check because you have to move your king. That's how chess works. And then black escapes, the king runs away. So that obviously didn't happen. And as we get to the game, now this pawn on h4 is gone. And for Jeffrey, his king can escape to g6, but it's not over. There's still attacking chances at that g7 pawn. So I'm not counting Noterbeck out at all.
Yeah, this is, I mean, both sides might have to change their pants at least once this game. This is pretty terrifying. I mean, rook h8, knight f8. The king just has a lot of different escape routes, right? You can go from g6 to f7 or from g6 to f5. And when the king reaches the open board like that, and it's surrounded by pawns, no amount of material is going to help you hunt the king down. The king just has too many different little crevices that it can hide in.
Although with a rook coming to 7th rank, if this g7 pawn is gone, then you don't have those pawns shielding your king. So what you need is, as you were saying, this pawn g5 and the king running out. But I don't think you're getting away with it. Jeffrey understands this is a critical moment. He's still up 30 seconds, but his clock is ticking. So where does this queen go? He goes to e1, takes an f2. And that means at the very least, he has a draw by repetition. If he wants it,
there's that rook d7 move.
Of course, he wants more, but he has a draw at minimum.
Yeah, but apparently there's a winning move here. Is it just to make a run for it with king g6? Is it really that?
The knight has no checks. The queen covers d4, so...
Wow. Oh, but there's rook g5 there?
Whoa. Oh, I have to show
loses. That endgame is still lost.
I know, but I have to show that. That's really cool. Sorry, king g7. We might just see it. So rook g7. If rook g5 check right now, the king can actually walk into a discovered check because there's no good move for this knight to win material. But Danya's point is after it takes, yes, you win the queen, you lose the knight, and black has 3 pawns and a knight for a rook, and these pawns will just run up the board. So black should be doing well. And that's why instead we see Noterbeck play rook to d7.
Yeah, he's trying to weave some sort of a net. He wants knight d4 check, but black is going to beat him to the punches. You're showing knight d5 intercepts the rook, and Jeffrey is on top of it, and he is just a couple of moves away from winning this game.
Yeah, knight coming into e3 actually looks decisive on this end of things, because it can also go to g4 with check, and this king is in big trouble. So it looks like Jeffrey is pulling away right now. Noterbeck, not much time and not much hope given the king on f5 has successfully made it away from white's attackers.
Well, it looks like Hikaru is still playing. We've got a lot of games still going on some of the lower boards. Which game catches your eye?
Well, let's go back to the Hikaru game, because all of a sudden it looks like Hikaru is weaving a checkmate net of his own. We see that the threat is knight to g6, and Hikaru's up a minute here. The eval bar says that black maybe is okay because trying to get this pawn, but
even rook takes a7 would win Hikaru the game given black's time situation.
Right.
That's the sad thing for Alexei. And that's exactly what he does.
You know what he had there, Danya? I think he
What
had
did he have
f6
there?
first.
Oh, and you couldn't take the knight because of f7.
Yeah, we can show that after the game concludes, but
Did
Alexei-
41 seconds?
Alexei is very fast.
Yes, but
And this
Hikaru is very tricky.
Objectively, this is a draw. And what Alexei's trying to do is just keep his king within these 3 squares over here. Do not run your king out into the center, because that will give this rook a check once you push the pawn to a7.
Yeah,
Wait.
but Hikaru's going to probably win this on the board somehow.
I don't know. I mean, this is clearly a draw, right? We both know
Oh,
Hikaru
this is
knows.
a dead draw.
Alexei knows the draw. So will Hikaru be able to flag him?
Okay,
Take the
now you
pawn.
take on g3.
Go back and then play g5 at some point. No, this is
Okay,
not. I
no,
think
Alexei will draw this with 30 seconds left on his clock. I mean, Hikaru might actually lose this.
It is pawn's a runner.
It's time to move the rook away, and we'll...
Oh, but is Hikaru gonna do the good old crystal ball?
With 26 seconds, I mean, that would be nuts if he flags him. This should be a pretty easy draw for Alexei.
I love how you said that, but you're like, oh, I don't. It's
Well,
Hikaru.
knowing Hikaru, he can win, and Hikaru declines the draw, so he's actually trying to flag him.
Well, to be fair, he might not have seen the draw, because sometimes you just make a move and that says you declined it.
Right, I mean, if I knew he offered me a draw, I would take him, but say I didn't see he offered me a draw, and I'd decide flag him.
We'll see if we'll get to 50 moves, because, I mean, Alexei's fast.
Alexei's playing very slowly here. He has to start pre-moving. Rook b1, but Hikaru's pushing him to the side. Oh!
Okay, pre-move something. Rook d2.
King
All right,
d2. Come on, king e2, rook d2. Faster!
just go. I think he
rook
has
a8 was such a tricky move.
it. I think
Rook
he has
d3.
this.
Why did he spend a second on rook d3?
Hey, man,
rook
I'm
e-
not a bullet specialist. I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, they must be getting pretty close to 50 moves, and Alexei has finally started to pre-move.
Yep.
I feel like he's going to get flagged.
Oh, it's going to be close.
All right, it's a draw.
Whew. 6.5 seconds remain. He makes the draw by
Made him
15
do
moves.
it. Made
Wow,
him
and I
do it.
actually, well, now it's important. I wasn't necessarily going to show it because I thought Hikaru would win regardless. But when he went rook takes a7, which is a million moves ago, and I can't even find it at this point. Oh, there it is. What he had at that moment, and it's not, I can't click on it. Okay, well, I'll just try to show it eventually. I can't, it's not letting me go back. And all right, I'll do the slow way. All the way back here.
I don't think Hikaru realized how drawn that endgame is. I think he thought he could, torture Alexei for a while, but it was just a straight up draw. But f6 is brilliant.
Well, I think that if the clocks were more even, he would have sat and thought about it. He wanted to flag Alexei. He's like, I don't care if I win on the board or win the clock, still a win. But f6, now the threat is f7, f8 equals queen. So if you take the knight, I get this queen. You're going to have to give the rook for that pawn. That's over. And if you take, I take here on a7 with check, and you're in this pin. So not only is white up a pawn to begin with, I'm probably going to be able to just win your bishop. And if not, let's say you go here and I go here, and then you go, okay, rook a4, I go knight to b8. The point is you have to play bishop b5, and good luck surviving this endgame when white is up a pawn and the knight is just coming right out.
This is completely winning, and 123 moves this time. And we had a 111 move game, I think, between Jose and Sinan Sigurov. So anyways, Hikaru up to 2.5 out of 3. We have a couple of games still going. Rasmus Svane
Who's
rebounding.
draw
with a win.
denied? This person, I have no idea who it is, but
I was trying to figure out who it was, but I got denied.
Well, this person tried to make a draw and it was denied because they lost. And this person is just losing for them. So at this point in time, I think we are done with round 3, which means that it's just about time for our break, I would imagine.
It is time for our break. We're going to take a breather for a couple of minutes, and the players will do the same. We will be back with round 4. Hope you're enjoying your Saturday RCC action thus far, and we will be back in just a couple of minutes.
The Rapid Chess Championship is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. You can earn crypto by learning about crypto at Coinbase.com. Explore DeFi and Web3 with your Coinbase wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with your Coinbase card and much, much more. Learn more at Coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. Check them out. Use the command sponsor or command Coinbase today and go to Coinbase.com to get that Bitcoin, baby.
Want to hold a massive chess tournament with dozens of clubs or hundreds of players? Or maybe a small chess tournament with local but competitive clubs? With Club Arenas, you can. Club Arenas allow for tournaments of any size with any number of clubs and players. Customize the arena with any time control, with standard chess or mini chess variants, and with any starting position you want. Club Arenas are the most flexible tournament format on chess.com. Try one out today.
Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship. Round 4 of 9 is upon us here alongside Grandmaster Robert Hess, as well as a ton of Grandmasters whose living rooms and bedrooms we are currently looking into. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed we are. And some familiar faces here. Nodibek Abusattorov, the world rapid champion. He is no stranger to success in these formats, but he did lose that game to Jeffrey Zhang that we had on air before the break. And so he is at 2 out of 3. Well, Jeffrey, he's in first place with the big fish, Fedoseev, as well as Jules Moussard. And you just really failed at taking a sip of whatever you were drinking. That was
Darn it, you noticed that? I was just
everybody knows
it was fly under the radar there.
It was incredibly loud, and it was just awkward.
You know when? So this is funny. I don't know if you'll be able to relate to this. When you're playing a chess tournament, and you're like, you know how sometimes you accidentally make like a sound that you didn't mean to make?
Yeah.
And then you feel really embarrassed.
Yeah.
Like you just make a sound with your like lips by accident.
No.
And then
You definitely succeeded there.
I don't know how that happened. I mean, how can a sip of water become that complicated?
You are able to complicate everything, it seems like. And
well, Hikaru is able to complicate the Sicilian defense.
What do you think about the checkers he's playing here?
Not bad. I mean,
you know how they always use that as like, oh, that person's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Hikaru started to play checkers while everybody else in this tournament is playing chess.
Clearly. And this is I mean, I know Gata Kamsky was a big fan of playing the Khan with G6, but I've never seen it played in this particular version. And it's plus 1.5, but I can bet you a silver dollar that Hikaru is going to be like much better than 3 moves.
Well, there's so many different ways to play this. You could play C4 and go Moroxi bind style, which takes away B5 and takes away D5. You could just play Bishop E3 and go for quick development rather than any pawn pushes. And I think what's tempting is F4 and eventual F5, because now there are 2 pawns that are targeted by the move F5, which means you're blasting open the F file. And with 0 pieces developed besides the queen, it looks like you can just try and go for a direct attack.
But the big question that you have to answer right now is whether you want to go C2, C4 Marozzi style, or whether you just want to go Knight C3 and essentially orient yourself in the direction of F4, F5, as you were saying. The one thing you don't want to do is spend 8 minutes making a decision here. Alexander Bordnik can tell you all about that.
Yeah, well, okay, he finally plays C there, which is actually a very good move. It just protects this knight. That actually is the reaction I feel like when I see the move C3. So I'm glad you did that. And Fedoseev, he's playing this calmly, so his advantage objectively, slipped a little bit, but the position is still very friendly for white. F5, F6 becomes a threat. This looks so suspicious.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, and if Hikaru plays D5, then of course White can meet that with E4, E5 and close down the center in his favor. Yeah, that bishop has seen better days. I mean, it's buried by this wall of pawns that are all on light squares.
Did Fedoseev get a haircut? He's looking like, very coiffed.
Well, he moved away from the Vatican, where he was making his temporary residence, or with views of the Sistine Chapel.
Well, Fedoseev, we know he is a very, very strong player. I always like to mention that a couple years ago, when Magnus came on chess.com, was trying to take over the #1 rating, Fedoseev was the person who stood in his path, beat him 8-7 in a 15-game match. And Magnus then was like, okay, it's not happening today. Of course, Magnus has later come back and won Title Tuesday, so he took the top spot by rating, but Fedoseev was the man in his way. So in this game, it looks like it's early. Hikaru's in for a think. Let's go to board 1, because we have Jeffrey Zhang and Jules Moussard, the French grandmaster, who isn't as well known as some of his players from his federation, like Maxime Vacher-Lagrave, and also Alireza Firouzja, now who plays for France. But Jules has been increasing his rating a lot, right? He's really improved as a player in the last year.
Yeah, and I think he didn't want to play the RCC. It rudely interrupted him because he was shopping at the jewelry store.
Oh my gosh! I thought you could make a joke because you just snore like the RZZ, like Z is for sleep.
Oh, the RZZ! Wow, that's way too common. Don't you understand that that's way above my intellectual pay grade? Come on, you know what kind of jokes I tend to make. Yeah,
no, I know. But Jules Moussard, he's now nearly 20. Actually, his rating here, 2669, that's probably about his new FIDE rating. So he's really improved over the last year. And against Jeffrey, he's got the black pieces. Jeffrey hasn't proven anything from the white side. It looks very level. And are we getting to that point in the tournament, Danya, where the players just happy to shake hands, make a draw, and say, we'll both make it the top 8 after that?
Yeah, well, a 3 out of 3. I don't think Jeffrey is, enthralled with this from the perspective of having the white pieces. I mean, you want to put the white pieces to better use. But on the other hand, 3.5 out of 4, every half point here is essentially golden once you're atop the standings, with a third of the tournament behind you.
Yeah, it's just level, and there's no real risk to take. Although now white is suddenly, this is what happens, right? You, as a player even, you think it's just an easy draw, But now there's some weaknesses in Black's position. And oh my gosh, Rook H5.
Yeah, Jules just completely ignoring the threat. He's like, oh, Jeffrey played 93. Let's just continue business as usual.
Okay.
It's a terrible oversight.
And this is actually something I think we should talk about. And I had a game a long time ago against Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov. And after the game, he said, you know, at first I thought Robert was just playing to make a draw. And I realized too late, he was just trying to get a position, because you get lulled into this false sense of security and you get comfortable. You think, I'm going to make a draw 80 different ways. And then you see Rook H5 happen. You can't play G5, you drop H6. You play Knight to G5, F4 happens, you drop D5. You play Knight C7, you drop G7 because Knight F5 check. So you just took his eyes off the prize, and now Jeffrey's gonna likely go to 4 out of 4.
Yeah, and that's what really distinguishes 2700s, right? They never just acquiesce to a draw. They never just say, okay, now I'm going to move back and forth. Every move that these people make has a purpose. And your job is always to figure out what that purpose is. And no matter how peaceful the position may seem, they will find a way to complicate things and, you know, give you a headache. Now, the game is not totally over yet. Jules trying to activate his rook, but losing that D5 pawn is going to be mighty painful.
Especially because that frees up this D pawn for Jeffrey. So they kick this knight out. And the knight E6 is a great defender. So if he's able, well, now if he moves the rook back, D5 is a fork threat. So it just feels like, you know, Jeffrey couldn't have asked for more from what was a very quiet position.
Yeah, he's up a pawn, and if he moves his rook away, he's going to be threatening a fork, and he's going to try to convert this endgame. But shall we have a look at some of the other top games?
Sure. Whoa. Oh my gosh. Let's go back to the Hikaru game. Because what is happening here? The big fish is just pummeling him.
I believe it's safe to say that the opening experiment has backfired.
What's the material count right now? Black is up a piece for how many?
Oh, Black is up a piece.
Oh, wait, no, he's not. Wait, there's 4 of them. Wait, Black's not even up a piece.
There's 4 of them. Oh, my God, there's material. Is it equal?
So why can't you just take this rook on F6? Should we go back to see how we got here?
Well, first of all, I think Hikaru is going to swindle his way out of this game. But
no way. No way. Look at his pieces.
Want to bet?
No, I don't want to bet, because it's always good to bet on Hikaru in a situation like this. But what is this?
I know. This is unbelievable. It feels like White has made 15 more moves than Black has.
Yeah, it also feels like Hikaru is like tilting, even though all he did was draw 1 game thus far.
Yeah, it really does. I think that last game really ticked him off. The fact that he didn't convert that endgame against Alexei, because he did everything to get out of a dubious situation. But even with a loss, he'll be in perfectly fine shape, you know, if he rebounds with a win in the next round. Okay, now I'm starting to feel like my pronouncement was a little bit too bold.
Okay, what in the 96?
And then rook takes C. Now, probably rook E7 is inadvisable, because then Black can play knight F6 at the end of the line.
There's knight C6 check.
Oh my God, there's so many weak squares, and he does take on F6 and rook E1, and the king is forced to walk out, and now rook E6 check.
Gosh, I mean, what? We can go through this game after. I feel like Fedosea is about to land a knock. What's just wrong with queen takes D5?
It's a disaster. It's a total disaster here. It's a disaster.
You take this pawn, and then your king just gets hunted down. I mean, it simply must be a checkmate in the few.
It's the worst position anybody's ever seen before.
Oh,
right?
Goodness.
But wait a second, Robert.
Yes?
Queen takes D5.
Queen F4.
Queen takes F4.
Yeah, Queen E6. King G7.
It's only plus 65.
Right.
Oh,
because you go here.
I mean, White is playing with 8 pieces and Black is playing with 0. That kind of helps. Yeah, look at that queen side.
Oh my gosh. And actually, Fedoseev, he led with the rook instead. So he brought his rook up to E6. The king goes to G7. He brings his rook in, and okay, where is the mate? The king is on H6.
Okay, maybe start with queen takes D5 and then knight takes F5.
Oh, it's the same thing. Queen F4, knight takes F5 check, and then queen E6, and then
Okay, I'm glad we didn't bet.
Yeah, no, I don't really like betting in general, especially not with friends, because if I like win something from you, I feel bad at that.
No, I've never been into betting either. The only time I ever bet was on the Super Bowl, the worst Super Bowl in history, the one where the Rams scored like 3.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one?
Of course I remember that one. Oh, gosh, here and here. Oh, the king actually is trying to run down there. So maybe we have to be a little bit careful, but takes. It's your first.
This is a total massacre, and I think Hikaru will not be repeating this opening the candidates.
Nope. Wow.
Oh my god.
Wow.
You don't see Hikaru go down like this, like, ever.
So let's see how this actually happened. We had a Sicilian. We left off around here. F4 and F5 was played.
Oh, and EF.
Because he didn't want to see some kind of queen H5 check.
Right.
But EF allowed knight D2. And after he castled, look at how easy it was for Fedoseev. He just brought his pieces. You know what? We'll probably go over this game later. We have a rapid recap too. So let's save this for later and go to current games. Because this, oh my gosh, Fedoseev.
And Jeffrey's going to win. Rook A6 is going to be the hammer blow.
Still Rook A6, it looks like.
Yeah, and well, after Rook takes B2, you go King C3, and then Knight C4 is a threat. So Black should probably take on F2. But that 2-on-3 should be a win because the Knight defends G2.
Yeah, it's a very well-placed knight.
Oh, no, you should start with King C2, I think.
Ah, that's actually just very precise.
And then Rook A6, and you keep the passer.
It's unstoppable, right? King C2, you can't even attack the F2 pawn. So you just attack the rook, protect the pawn. The rook moves somewhere, and Rook A6 next, and that's resigns.
I want to point out, I point this out to my students. Look at how much time Jeffrey is spending. And I always like to say, if a 2700 is spending 15, 20 seconds double checking everything, then you should spend, at least double that. And I think that's a very good deterrent against people who think that they know everything and want to play too fast.
Yes. And so the F2 pawn was captured, but this is an improved line because before we were talking about just these two pawns against these three with the extra knight. Now you also have a B pawn, so you're just going to throw it up the board.
And look at that knight protecting both of the kingside pawns and the pawn on G4, deep freezing Black's pawns. And Jules, I think, is going to resign right here and right now.
Yep. And this is actually a checkmate threat. So everything is awful here for Jules. And for Jeffrey Zhang, he's going to 4 out of 4, thanks to an inaccuracy in what looked like a pretty level position, but doesn't matter how he did it. It's just the fact that he is getting...
Zhang Fedoseev is going to be a fire matchup, isn't it?
It will for sure. It will be, how do they say that? Awesome?
I believe they do say that. You know what else is awesome?
A new game to look at?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what else is awesome.
Levon against Paravian? How's that one sound?
Wait, how are we only on move 19 of this game? I feel like we just climbed Mount Everest and descended, and this game is still in its opening phase.
Look at Black's clock. That's how.
Oh, that's I see.
Yeah. Whoa. He gave up his bishop to get the knight.
that just leads to a liquidation.
If B4, there's just queen C4, so you can just ignore the pawn. He's plays H3. So, all right, question for you, right? Levon, he doesn't play that much speed chess, like blitz and all that stuff. You think he's in the mindset of let me flag this guy?
I mean, absolutely. And yeah, if you're Levon, I think white is slightly worse here. Black is just more active. So you want to try to keep as many pieces on the board for as long as possible. The one thing you don't want to do is trade rooks and then trade queens and give Black the kind of situation that Alexei Serrana had against Hikaru, where you can essentially start pre-moving. No, but David is just not sensing the danger. I mean, he's spending 15 seconds a move. You can't do that.
Yeah, this is just, you have 1 minute, 40 seconds. He goes queen C7, and all right, he protects his rook because he was worried that if he moved his bishop, there would be the queen sack for the couple rooks, and that would be a problem. So now his bishop is free to move, whether it's A2 or whether it's bishop takes F3. And Levon, he can make a move like knight to D4, but then he does have to watch out for this pawn hanging over here.
But that could be an interesting thing to do, even if it doesn't work out objectively. It'll force David to do some calculation. Knight D4, bishop A2, B3. And then it's anybody's game, and that's exactly what he does. And Levon has just such a good sense of how to cause the most amount of practical problems for the opponent. It's an incredible skill.
Yeah. And he says, take here, and we're discussing B3, lock that bishop in, and then these squares, F5 and E6. And already knight F5 is a really big threat. It doesn't seem like it's that powerful, but getting access to E7 and putting pressure on G7 all at once is going to be a cause for concern.
Isn't it amazing? We talk about knight F5, but in all seriousness, essentially any time a knight reaches F5, it's dangerous. It almost doesn't matter what the other circumstances are or how many other pieces you have in the attack. It's crazy how much power a knight has when it reaches F5 and there's a king that's castled to that side. 96.
Boom, boom.
Oh.
Fork City.
Game, set, match.
And that is the real problem when you're down to a minute while your opponent is 4. You make one quick move thinking that I got to get the knight out of there. And you welcome the knight right in to where it wants to be after all. And that's a fork. That's a win. That's Levon Aronian going to 3.5 out of 4.
Okay. David is going to resign. Let's get back to the drawing board and see which games we still have going. And we still have XXY Seoul. I think that's Chinese Grandmaster
Xu Shangyu here.
Xu Shangyu. Yep, against Raunak Sidwani. Both of them with 2.5 out of 3. God, we've got a lot of people with big scores.
Yeah, and Raunak, he scored first place last week in the Swiss. He went all the way to the final before losing to Alexander Grischuk. And in this position, Danya, we love the bishop pair. This pawn on a4 is not a strength. That's certainly a target. And I'm just liking this for the Chinese Grandmaster.
No, this is a very difficult endgame for black. The 2 bishops, the pawn on c3, as you're indicating, the weakness of the pawn on a4, and Raunak, his pieces are completely held at bay by white's bishops, especially that knight on d6, totally restricted by the bishop on d3, and the bishop on f6, blunted by the pawn on c3. So if you're Shang Yu, you don't necessarily want to rush with c4. You want to arrange your bishops optimally, which is exactly what he's doing, and then when the time is right, start pushing that c-pawn.
And also just from a blitz perspective, it's so difficult to even make single moves for black. Like, oh, bishop c5 about to hurt me. Do I have to deal with that? Just the power of the bishops here. And he plays e5. I actually really like that move from Raunak. He's just trying to start throwing his pawns forward because he does have an extra pawn on the king side.
And all of that bullet experience and JSCC experience could serve Raunak well. I don't think his opponent is quite at the same level of experience in bullet, but look at that move, making space for the bishop to move over to c2. But is that too passive, Robert? Could that give black a chance at kingside counterplay?
It looks like it. Bishop c2 now, going for the a4 one. I like the bishop on c5, of course, because the knight is frozen for now. Rook takes a4 is the next move, but we also love a good bathtub pawn formation, and be very, very careful here if you're white, because at some point those pawns are going to push up the board.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? You think, oh, white's got connected passers, the game is over. But all that it takes for black to create a passer is, well, actually, it's very hard for black to create a passer, so never mind.
Well, f3, there might actually be e3, because if the bishop takes f5, the move e2 is there with knight d6 to follow. It's a very concrete line with a fork of the pieces.
Yeah, this is, and Shang Yu is taking a while. Why is it only 0.3?
Probably because of the power of black's pawns over here. Oh, well. He gave up his
so he gives up a pawn, drives the pawn up to b5. This is anybody's game, but can black stop the pawn? It gets the rook over to b7.
I think that at some point, if he's able to, Shang Yu should bail out, because I'm not liking his clock management. And so if he can just start trading pawns with f3 at some moment, he has to go for it.
Right. But he's down to 59 seconds. I'm just more worried about the clock than anything else.
No, Raunik's too experienced. And you know his age belies that experience because he's still a teenager. But right now he's doing everything right. Don't go king e5 because there's rook d5 check. But
don't go knight e5 because there's rook d6 check. How do you deal with that?
Oh, and then you have to go after rook d6, you go back, but there's back and forth for white.
But then there's already b6, and he does go king e5, and I think he just wants to step back to f6. No, he goes forward to f4.
Oh my gosh, give me a pawn. Checkmate. Nope, can't do that. All right, so knight e5, there's g3 check.
Right. If that pawn was in an h4, g3 would almost be checkmate.
Now he wants knight e5 because g3 no longer works. The king doesn't need to be protecting the knight because the rook is there.
White can't procrastinate any longer. You have to push that b pawn. And look at the clock. He's down to 30 seconds. He's taking way too long on a move, on each move.
He's got to go. King b4, it looks reasonable. Knight e5 very quickly played by Raunak, trying to get the knight to d3. Play b6.
He goes bishop c4, stopping knight d3.
If this rook moves to c7, there's g3 check. That's such an easy blunder to make.
It is, and even that wouldn't have been the end of the story, and Raunak sets his pawns in motion, and white's just not going to make it.
Yeah,
this is over.
So
this is over.
Slowly. b6.
Rook b7.
Wow.
Pushes the pawn to g3. Now he's got a passed e-pawn.
But if he takes there, I guess you
can't go b7.
You don't have time to go rook takes e5, rook takes 5, b7, because there's rook back to e8.
I think you can. You can take with a king, but you can also take with a pawn. I mean, that h-pawn is way, way too far back to be any concern.
Yeah, you'd love to send it, but it's too far away. King takes g3, and It should be coming now. Rook takes e5 is a threat, followed by b7.
And now Raunak taking a long time. And that e-pawn is fully circumscribed by the bishop.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Wait, that's
Wait
a huge
moment.
threat. King f4
Wait,
back, then king
e3.
a5. King a5. Okay, king c5, he wants king
c5.
d6.
And rook g7, he's trying to aim for that g2 pawn and maybe sacrifice the rook for the b pawn.
King c, oh, goes back instead of forward. Go back. You got to make a draw.
Bishop c6, that was a bad move. Why
Where's the
e3 and now
pawn?
e2? He took his eyes off of the pawn.
Take and take.
b7.
Yep.
And you
And there it
can't stop
goes.
the pawn.
Wow.
It's over. You can give a check on d4 and then you still can't stop the pawn.
No, you cannot. G3?
H takes.
Yeah, he wanted the king to take, so you could take here, but that's not going to do the trick.
It doesn't even matter. No matter where the black king is, the rook will not be able to stop the pawn.
No, and black is the one ahead on the clock, so you're throwing in some random checks. He wins on time. He wins the board. Big win there for Raunak Sidwani.
What a game. And Raunak moves to 3.5 out of 4. And does that conclude the games from this round? Because we will take a very, very short break to take care of something once the round is concluded. But let's verify that all of the games have finished.
Yeah, it looks like the games are done, so we can take
Yes.
that short break.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back in right around 30 seconds. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase, and we are watching round 5 with 2 players having perfect scores. It's Jeffrey Zhang facing off against Vladimir Fedoseev, who just destroyed Hikaru Nakamura in that incredible Sicilian game. And Robert Hess, impressive performances all around from everybody at the top.
Really? And I thought you were going to mention the opening because you and I both love a good Sicilian Alapin. And if we just go to quickly through the opening, C3 Sicilian, we love. It's a favorite of ours ever since childhood. And in this continuation, Danya, where the pawns get exchanged, and look at this move. Bishop takes d5. Most players thinking, I don't want to give my bishop for the knight. But the point is that the bishop takes, then knight c3, and you get the bishop right back because it's pinned. And after pawn takes, you're just playing against this isolated pawn here in the center. I tend to like these positions from the white side, but I do have the bias because I've played this opening since childhood.
Oh, yeah. And when did you actually start playing the Alapin? Because I started playing it full-time at around 1600, and I played it all the way through to 2000. And even as a GM, I mean, I play it almost exclusively in Online Blitz. I love the Alapin.
I don't even know how old. Maybe let's say 11. I'm just going to throw out a random age, but I was very young when I started playing the Alapin because it was able to avoid more of like the forcing tactical sequences that I think a lot of players are scared of when it comes to the Sicilian. So it's much more of a maneuvering battle. And right now, look at that move, knight to a6. You couldn't play knight c6. You would have dropped the pawn on d5 right away. That's why the knight stays out of the bishop's path. But does it actually serve the purpose? Because knight d5, bishop d5, thank you very much for your knight over here.
Right. But on the other hand, at the end of that line, it feels like white's pieces are a little bit scattered, and maybe black can move his queen away from d7, unpinning it. And that bishop on d5 is going to acquire tremendous strength as it pressures the knight, maybe queen e6 simply. And that queen could also swing over to g6. So this might be cashing in a little bit too soon. And Jeffrey it might be in his best interest to keep that pawn on d5 to keep the bishop passive.
Just so tempting. You see a pawn that, it works as tactically speaking, but I think it actually frees up black. This bishop on b7 is a bad piece. You often, even in some positions that start with 1 d4, right? You sacrifice a pawn with these semi-tarashes just to close down that bishop, vacate the d4 square for a knight, and then maybe even push the pawn to e6.
Right. And Jeffrey is taking quite a while here. He's definitely contemplating knight takes d5. I mean, that pawn certainly is juicy, but I would much prefer a move like h3 or knight d4 and just kind of slowly improving.
Yes, and knight takes d5 was played, and queen takes a6. So this line we might see
queen e6.
Yep. Right, because you would love to play queen g4 and go for some kind of checkmate the knight, but the bishop was hanged. But plays rook d8 so he can.
Oh, that's even better. Queen g4 is now a threat.
Yes, it is indeed.
And that's another hallmark of a very strong player. You look at the pin, and everyone's first reaction is, I need to get the queen out of d7 ASAP. But not Fedoseev. He realizes that there's no actual way to put pressure on the bishop, and he prepares to move the queen out to a much better square than if he would have rushed it with queen e6.
Right. So he just some more flexibility. You can't pile up pressure. You wouldn't need to play queen to e6 if this knight could come to e3 or something, but there's no pressure to be added on this d file. So rook d8 is a really good one. And rook f to d8, moving a rook from the f file to the a file because this pawn on a7 needs some tending to.
Right. It's hard to get a handle on this position.
I was going to say, I still like it from white because you're up a pawn, and I feel like black has more to prove, but what were you going to say?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out if black can put that light-squared bishop to good use, because you could imagine a scenario where white gets the knight to d4, and black doesn't really get anything going on the king side, and then white could start consolidating his material advantage. But I like what Vladimir just did there. He went h5, he induced a weakness on the g4 square. So can he actually cash in his initiative on the king side? Can he put that light-squared bishop to good use? That's the big question here.
Yeah, no, it's a really important one because with this pawn going up to h4 for white, that, as you said, gives away the square, but also it gives the king an escape route on h2. And so that may be good for white going forward.
Well, we'll see how this game proceeds, and we'll keep a very close eye on it because these are the two leaders in queen g4. And let's not go anywhere because the eval bar thought that was a losing move. And is it because of rook d4? No.
Rook d4 it wasn't.
Wait,
So
Let's figure it out.
So queen g4.
Oh, rook takes d5 and queen b7.
Oh my gosh, rook d5.
It's not the fork. It's not that you're forking the two rooks. You're attacking the bishop.
All at once.
Oh, my lands.
All at once.
Oh, Lord. That's crazy. And that was a huge mutual oversight.
Yep. So I think that would have been game over. That would have been donezo.
Oh, my lands. And that comes out of nowhere. I mean, you just don't think about these kinds of things. Wow.
Yeah.
Jeffrey's going to be kicking himself if he doesn't win this game.
Yeah, this is a queen moving back to g6 now, and rook takes d5 was there, right? Just a good old sacrifice of an exchange just to get the queen into b7, forking everything.
Right.
Yeah, so
queen g6, and now there's still rook takes d5, and Fedoseev is just not seeing this idea at all.
Right.
He's just
rook takes d5. I think Jeffrey's going to see it the second time around.
I mean, you got to see it because now the rook is literally in close physical proximity to the bishop, right? And he doesn't. He played rook at1. That's crazy, Robert. I mean, we have the benefit of the eval bar. Yes, that's true, but this is third grade stuff.
It's one of those things that when it's off your radar, it's just completely off your radar. And it was a blind spot for Jeffrey. And, we know Jeffrey very well, and we know that he will be kicking himself for missing that because he'll go over the game like, oh, how am I not looking for the tactics? But he was taking this kind of step by step, and instead of finding rook takes d5 and punishing Fedoseev, he allows him to get away with it. And now the position apparently is level.
And look, I'm a broken record, but LPDO, bishop on e7, undefended. Right after rook takes d5, both of the rooks undefended. You got 3 undefended pieces in close physical proximity. You got to start looking for forks, and oh my god!
Oh my goodness!
Oh my goodness!
Now
Queen
the
takes
bishop
g3 is coming.
And Jeffrey, actually against this very same opponent, it was Fedoseev in the knockout, if I'm not mistaken, who was down. No, it was Andreykin, excuse me. But Andreykin was down a pawn in the endgame. And Jeffrey somehow lost. Like it was bishop and 5 against bishop and 4. So
wow.
Jeffrey just in a couple games has really slipped up and not only given away a winning position, but in fact losing these games.
And he's gonna be furious with himself for missing rook takes d5. And he had not one, but actually 2 chances to win the game with that move. And is this completely lost? Can you give up the exchange favorably somehow? I don't think you can. I think you're basically just busted.
Yeah.
And wow. Queen b1, queen a2, adding insult to injury.
Yes. And sorry, let me just flip this board around for a second. But wow, if we just go back in time so we can remind everybody of what we're talking about. Sorry for all the technical issues, everybody. But there was this move, rook takes d5, way back when. Because if rook takes d5, there was queen to b7, forking the house, 2 rooks and a bishop all at once. And Jeffrey didn't just miss it once. He missed it twice because rook takes d5. The next turn, again, had the same problems for black. So when that didn't happen and the exchanges happened on d4, it was a mistake not to take on d8. Now bishop c5 was just game over, hitting the rook, pinning the f2 pawn, winning material. So
eat your broccoli, take your vitamin C, do your puzzle rush.
Do everything all at once. And unfortunately for Jeffrey, it is now -7 in Fedoseev's favor. And yeah, this is kind of easy at this point for a player of Fedoseev's caliber.
Yeah, he's going to win this, and he's going to move to 5 out of 5, and all he really needs is 1 more win or 2 more draws, and he's going to guarantee himself qualification into the Sunday knockout. So this game is basically in the bag. Shall we have a look at the other top boards?
Let's do it. Let's move on from this one. If somehow Jeffrey survives, that would be shocking. But let's go to the game between Raunak Sadwani and...
Fascinating endgame. Oh, they're offering each other draws. Okay, that game's over.
Yep. Yeah, so
Not
right
much
now...
to say here.
Raunak at 4 out of 5, as with Levon. So let's keep on going.
Bortnik against Iran on board 3.
What do we make of this pawn here? It looks like he's just giving the...
Well, we're probably going to get a 2-on-3 now. Bortnik is one of the fastest players on the planet, And what Alexi's trying to do is he's trying to keep as many pieces on the board for as long as possible. That's what Hikaru failed to do when he was playing Alexi.
Yeah, so is there really chances, though, for black? I mean, at some point, you're going to have to take this. And Bornik spent a ton of time before playing rook c7, but his threat is now pawn b7. And if bishop takes b6, Danya, is he going to trade rooks, or is he just going to trade knight for bishop?
In my experience, it's actually probably easier to hold if you trade knight for bishop. No, and also, Robert, if you go rook b7, black can avoid the trade of rooks with rook b1 and rook g1.
Oh, that's actually really nice. You give this check on g1, and the king will have to go to f3 or h3, and then the bishop is free to go. So, yeah, bishop takes b6. You will have to take with the knight in order to make your position salvageable. And it is a very easy theoretical draw. These players have studied the Dvoretsky in-game manual. They get that. But what's the flagging likelihood at this point?
50-50. I would say over a minute, Bornik should be able to hold. But a very, very skilled player will know how to squeeze every single second off of your clock. The basic strategy is this. You play 45 moves, and then you push a pawn, you play f6, and you try to play as tricky as possible, right? You put your rook on b7 and c7, and you try to deter pre-moves. And eventually, when you start to fear repetition, you make, the smallest possible change to the position. You go f6. Let's see how Alexei executes this.
Yeah, no, I think...
Or not, we don't have to stay on this game.
No, at some point you throw in a check just to be distracting, but with a minute left, I think that it's going to take too much time, and we could find a more interesting battle. Like, for example,
I agree.
The one here between Hikaru and Matthias.
Hikaru is scuffling here, Robert.
Yeah, no, with the black pieces is Hikaru. He's not down a pawn. It's actually even material, but look who's more active. The rook on d6 is the better rook, and this here on the queen side. White's one pawn stops both the blacks, and that means that Hikaru won't have a way to break free a passed pawn.
And Hikaru's got a serious weakness on f4. If White can win that pawn, then White's pawn majority on the king side is going to start rumbling up the board at a furious pace. So maybe you want to consider knight e6, there's knight c3.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be careful not to get mated here if you're Matthias.
Yeah,
yep, exactly. Or rook to h7.
What's the threat of king to g8 and rook h7 mate? So
I was thinking about that. There's rook takes g6 though.
Right. So king h2, that way you can always escape. But what was this?
Knight f5?
Trying to make a draw, you think?
Clearly. I mean, clearly this is a sign of a lack of ambition. I think Hikaru could essentially force a draw with knight e3 to f5. And that's exactly what he's going to do.
And now rook d7, you take this one. Although...
Ooh, White's going to end up a pawn down.
Yeah, that doesn't... Although rook a7, rook takes g5, and rook a4. That's a big move, just to go after this one. And Bluebaum is a very strong bullet player.
No, there's no question. And Hikaru might try to get his king up to the queen side ASAP. I love what you're indicating. The rook c4. Don't just go rook b4 passively. You don't actually need to defend that pawn directly.
Yes, and he's just trying to actually set his king up for a walk up the board. Okay. King g4. Now rook takes b5. So he allowed that. I think he forgot. He should have played rook b4.
Oh my God. I mean, why pre-move? Just take 2 or 3 seconds. Make sure you're not blundering a pawn, and now he's going to lose.
Well, or is he? Is Hikaru's the e7? What's the deal here? Rook g6, king d7,
rook takes g5. I think you're in time.
Yes, your king gets to take on f4. So that's actually a huge calculation that your king gets inside the square. And this is the square that we're going to be looking at. And that means that you are able to take this pawn on g5.
And Bluebaum has already calculated, and he instantly goes rook takes g5. And Hikaru will be forced to make a draw here. And that will move him to 3 out of 5. Not the best spot for Hikaru Nakamura, but he's still trying to squeeze something out of this position. He's not going to be able to, though.
No, this pawn is falling. If you try too hard to win, you get yourself in trouble. And Bluebaum with 45 seconds left.
Okay. It's
king c5. Just bring this king up with your pawn, and at some point sacrifice your rook for the b pawn. This is... should we stay here, though? I don't know. I'm not always convinced until it's...
Stay here for a couple more moves. But what is he doing?
Oh, he had rook
g6, rook b6. Oh my God, but Matthias just had to bring his king back. What is he doing?
And this is the
king
threat?
e5. Just go king a5, king d4.
Go back here. Just oh my gosh, he found it the second time.
I mean, what is going on in these end games? Just anything Drew except what he did. Don't go f5.
Right, and king c6, now you have f5 because there's no rook d5, rook b5. You
And
block the
Hikaru
check.
missed that too. And he's going to be furious with himself.
And
when
it's
he
not
finds out.
It's not the first time today, right? Against Serrana, Hikaru is playing for his opponent's clock, not fully looking at the board and allowing him to escape rook b5 check, play f6.
But just why not f6? Yeah, he should have played f6 first, and now f7.
Oh!
Whoa, rook take. What is
my
that?
gosh! What
This
is
might
that?
be the worst technique I've ever seen.
What in the world?
How do you do that? King f7? Is that a mouse slip? Is that a brain slip? Both?
And even if Hikaru doesn't win this over the board, look at the clock. There's no way you survive with the rook.
God, only Hikaru wins these types of endgames.
That was
literally
ridiculous.
the only person on the planet who wins these kinds of positions.
This rook is now gone. Check and win it. Oh my gosh. As soon as the checkmate happens, right here, let's go back. We need to show, first of all, right here, king e6.
Okay, go king e4 and king d3 and win the pawn.
Right, the king can just walk back towards the pawn, no problem. Instead, he allows check, which Hikaru doesn't play, and then rook b6, because now you have to sacrifice your rook for this pawn, otherwise I queen, and then the king is too close, and in conjunction with this rook getting behind the pawn. So I'm easily winning in this exact sequence here, blah, blah, king, king, get the pawn. So that was one. Then the game was still a draw, and Danya, the move here, king to f7, help me out.
And are you kidding me?
Help me out.
Here's the amazing thing. If white had played f7 instead, black actually has rook f6 check. So things get a little complicated here. Rook takes f6 is still a draw. b1 queen, king g7, and if anything, black's got to be a little bit careful. I also think white can probably sack on b2, and that might be the most clinical option instead of f7.
Right.
Anything, or rook b5 check. Just check the black king, get it away from the pawn. What are you doing? You've got 20 seconds.
And as you were saying, you could check and then go get a queen of your own, and that just makes a draw. And he had plenty of time to find this. So that's a huge slip from Bluebaum, but a huge victory for Hikaru. He's not played his best chess, that's clear, and yet he still has 3.5 out of 5. And that's the sign of an exceptional player. Even when you're not in your A game, you're still up in the top 8.
Absolutely. And Vladimir Fedoseev is atop the tournament, lording atop the tournament with 5 out of 5. He's the only person with a perfect score. He leads by a point, but he's got a very challenging pairing. He has the black pieces against Levon Aronian.
And Levon playing e4 historically, at least ever since he became a super GM top player in the world. Levon, he plays a lot of d4, but we see
variation.
We see online he plays a lot of e4. So he's been mixing and matching, in particular in blitz and rapid events. He plays a good amount of e4.
By the way, for those who are on the hunt for opening traps, you see that he just castled there. Instead of castles, there's a very tricky move c3, and I used to fall for this all the time. I would play bishop g4 here and think, let me get the bishop outside the pawn chain before I go e6. But you're laughing because you know that after queen b3, the f7 pawn, the b7 pawn, you're going to lose one of them, and it's actually already almost lost.
Yes.
Because you can't afford to lose either of those pawns.
You're just so tempted to pin this knight and try to go knight e5 and all that stuff, and yet it walks right into this queen b3. So instead, we saw kind of casual moves, but black is clearly doing pretty well.
I'm not, this will not enter the top 5 top white openings of all time. I think Levon is just trying to get, a nondescript position and kind of outplay his opponent. So I can understand that approach.
Yes. So, it's just calm play from Levon. He's already up almost a minute on the clock. So for somebody who has been playing a lot of these rapid chess championship events, but not always playing blitz or bullet, I think he just feels way more comfortable with the lead on the clock because he doesn't want to rely on his mouse.
I agree. Okay, so Levon with a relatively quiet position, trying to go bishop h6, and Vladimir trading on b3 and striking with d5, a trade. And Levon probably going to follow up with bishop h6, and he does, and he's playing instantly. And Fedoseev offered a draw. Let's see if Levon takes it. No, he does not, which is understandable.
I think that at this point, for Levon, he's down a full point compared to Fedoseev. And there are a lot of people who are chasing. So he has the white pieces. He probably feels very comfortable. He's also up a minute and a half, and his position carries zero risk at the moment. So why would he accept the draw?
No, absolutely. White pieces, a win here would go a very, very long way to ensuring that Levon not only qualifies to the Sunday knockout, but gets a pretty decent seeding.
Right. So maybe we should just head on, get a little bit of variety in the early stage of this round. Let's go to the game between Raunik.
Wani?
Uh,
I don't want to stay on this game.
Yeah, no, they agreed to draw. I try to click on the game and it's done. Let's go to Alexei Sarana against Dmitry Andreikin and King E6, something like that. And okay, White looks ready to
King to
give it to
E6 and okay, but no, but this kind of play is very boring. I remember when I was 4 years old, studying this with Simon Furman. Okay, maybe this is a little bit too boring.
Yeah, I think we can go to another game for now. The black does have these problematic pawns, but there's no way for white to take advantage of them. And so black also, if you're not careful, look towards this queen side over here. You're down a pawn on this side with all these pawns here. So black down the line later in the game maybe could take advantage, but for now white's just much more active. But I agree with you. It's a little bit closed, not really our number one position. And well, this is anything but closed. F3.
It feels like Hikaru is just extremely tilted this tournament. He's still going to qualify, but he's in very bad shape here. It takes a knight h5, as you're indicating? What is King f8?
What? Okay, I think he might have been worried about something down this line, but after ED,
but come on, what's going on? Knight h5 is, knight takes g3 is a threat, and bishop takes d4 is a threat. And what's hard about that? You
can't move your king to f2 because bishop d4 check. And king g2 is going to walk into this move, I believe.
And knight e2 walks into queen h3, I think, potentially.
Yeah, but look at this.
Oh my god!
Yeah, no, this is what I was looking at.
What a mate! Oh, that's gorgeous. That is gorgeous.
One of Hikaru's best ever games was that win over Krasenkov, if you know that game, where he sacks his queen and just delivers a checkmate. Yep. So this is what I was thinking could be the end. Queen h3 check, so you get a double check, and you lure the king out into the open, and that is what they call shachmat. Is that actually how you say? I know. Is that just chess?
No, mat.
Checkmate? Just mat?
Chess is shachmate.
Yeah.
And mate is just mat.
Wow, that's okay. But what's checkmate then?
Mat.
But that's checkmate or just mate?
No, there is no checkmate. It's just one word.
If you're speaking Russian British and you're talking about your friend, what do you say?
If I'm speaking Russian British and I'm talking about my friend?
Yeah, your mate.
Oh. You're so funny. Oh my god.
Let's go back to this game over here. Woo! Okay.
I think that draw for which Levon declined ain't looking so bad anymore.
Where's his A pawn?
I believe it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. So that's a problem. And now his rook's under attack.
Okay, so he's threatening queen h6, but Vladimir nips that in the bud with g5, attacking the rook.
Yep.
Okay.
So look at this. Attack the rook on a4, attack the rook on h4. Do you go to g4 and maybe h4 next? Or is black going to get to play h5? Although then there's a rook sack, I feel like.
Yeah, with probably a perpetual there, because the king can't really run to the e file. There's a rook on e1 that could strike with rook takes c5. So Vladimir could also tuck his king back to h8, but that doesn't really prevent h4. That knight on h2 is amazing.
h6, just the calm move, defending everything. So your knight is terrible. Although if that knight gets out to g3, then it's going to be hopping into some vulnerable squares.
Yeah, and there's h4.
You don't seem to believe in this position at all. That was like...
Well, it just takes so long. Knight f1, knight g3. And even if you get there, black's bishop could slide back to d7 at the right moment. There's no question in my mind that black is close to being winning here. But Levon, we know how tricky he is. We know how good he is at producing practical chances in virtually any position.
Yep. This is a position where at some moment you may fall victim to a surprise rook sacrifice. I mean, that's what I'm focused on. It's like I'm looking already at these sacrifices because after takes, rook takes, pawn takes, queen takes, right? The king goes to f7. You have knight g4 with the queen f6 and knight takes e5. For a blitz time control, which we're getting closer to, this could work. Obviously, we see the bar saying, get out of here. No shot.
Yeah, and it is in these types of positions where knowing what the eval bar says gives you so much more confidence than if you just have this straight up.
Right.
Okay, knight f1. So there's your idea.
Yes, indeed. The knight is
So
just...
the knight heading for g3.
There's no queen d4. Well, the bishop's trying to kick this rook out of here, because if you get rook h8, queen d4, you're going to cause problems for this king on h1.
Right, that's the one big thing that's causing black discomfort, is the fact that the queen is sort of trapped on b2. Now, it's in no danger of getting, white can't win the queen, but white is keeping it at bay as long as the rook remains on the fourth rank. Although you're pointing out knight e3, knight c4 would force the queen to a2, and then there'd be queen c3, rook a1 ideas. So it's possible. It's just highly unlikely.
Yeah, although I think what's frustrating about these positions is, while Levon is down to pawn, he knows he's worse. For Vladimir, you're now down almost 2 minutes on the clock. You're also, I should find a way to not just be better, but like go for a win. And then you start burning clock. Your queen's over here on b2, kind of weirdly placed, and you start getting frustrated. Where is my win?
Yeah, and the eval bar is showing us that there is no win. You probably just have to play slow moves like king g7, g6 maybe to secure the f5 square. And it's then hard to make a good move here for black.
Yeah, this knight is just hopping right around.
I mean, maybe b5, but that creates a weakness on c5.
Right, like if you knight e3, b5, maybe this queen even comes out to a5 and starts putting pressure and trying to get in. So Fedoseev, he's really down a lot of time here.
Yes, he is. And king g6 has been played.
Yeah, I'm playing knight e3 in 2 seconds.
Yeah, and that's... Levon is not going to take 2 seconds, but he might take 10.
And it's smart to spend time. If you're Levon, you have plenty of it.
Right.
But I think the clock is his best weapon, and he needs to recognize that.
No, and I'm sure he does. And the knight just doesn't have any other routes. I mean, you don't want to go to g3 because then you're completely dead.
Right.
Knight e3 is going to happen.
Think about g4, but I would not want that. Although if you give up your exchange on e4, maybe that at some point can be worth it. But yeah, he plays knight e3.
Call that. There it is.
I mean, Danya, I feel like a more experienced Hikaru would have played knight e3 in 5 seconds.
Rook a4. No.
Why not? And then knight d1.
Oh, and then knight c3 and rook b1. Unbelievable. And exactly what I said cannot happen. Oh, and he goes knight d1 immediately.
Even easier. Yeah, there's rook
their move order is better.
Yeah, the bishop lost sight of a4, so the rook just comes here next.
As long as the bishop remained on d7, you essentially guaranteed that when the queen reached the a file, it could evacuate via a6. And Levon Aronian he's just a wizard. How does he do that?
He just created like a difficult position for black to make progress in, and you make one mistake, and then he says your queen's trapped. Good for you. Rook a4, knight c3, as you mentioned, and that queen is gone. And that's a win for Levon. So Fedoseev, his perfect streak comes to an end here at the hands of the Armenian-American Grandmaster.
Indeed. And Levon Aronian will move to 5 out of 6, where he will join Vladimir Fedoseev atop the tournament standings. And we can trust that Levon will convert the extra queen. And in the meantime, what's going on in Hikaru's game against Billy Kimba?
Oh, that was the analysis I did before. I was like,
I was like, wait a second, did this actually happen?
No, it did not. Instead, we have this position.
Whoa.
Yep.
This is, I guess, not as bad for white as it may appear. Because it appears really, really bad.
This looks really awful because there's a king on g1 that's wide open. And how is this only -1?
I don't understand. Like, what if rook a1? What is white going to do there?
Are you asking like rhetorically? Do you really want to answer?
I would like you to answer. I guess it's king g2.
The king can escape, and that protects this bishop on c1, because one of the ideas of rook a1 is to take things like that, and it still looks so questionable for this white king.
The king is just incredibly safe on g2. It's hard to access the king. You have the rook on b2 that's guarding the second rank. The bishop on f3 is controlling important squares. The knight on f4 controlling h3. So black's king is also not totally out of the woods either, especially if the knight moves away from d7.
Yeah, this is king f8. That was the culprit. When he made it way back when, it was the wrong move. He wasn't thinking tactically. And now the king on f8, if you're not looking out, can fall victim to a back rank issue. So Matlikov also down quite a lot of time.
He's taking way too long on this move.
Is he thinking about getting to the e3 square?
I guess so. Or he might be thinking about, I don't know, rook takes b2 and knight takes c5. I mean, there's a lot of juicy options.
Oh. Okay, so rook b2, bishop b2, knight c5. bishop a3, like queen a7. I could like see why this would be tempting.
Yeah, but then again, the king will just hide on g2 at the end of the line, and your initiative is going to evaporate essentially before it even began.
Yeah, the king is just chilling on g2. You don't even have another check, and you actually only have 2 pawns for a piece, and your king is now in worse shape. So he's still not moving.
Yeah, no, he's going to lose on time, and Hikaru is just not going to let you go when you've got a minute and a half in a position this complicated.
And I'm just trying to work it out. Is there some kind of knight c3 that we should be focused on? Like, why is he burning all his remaining time?
Well, is he? Because now Hikaru's clock is ticking. Oh, moves have been made.
Sorry, that's on me.
No, you're good. You're totally good, but Maxime is down at 2 minutes and 28 seconds, and I would still prefer black here. I think in the long run, black wants to maybe take on f3 and then get the other knight over to e4.
Mm-hmm.
But this looks a whole lot better than Hikaru's position did like 10 moves ago.
Yeah, if he can get these 2 moves, bishop d2, rook e1 type of stuff in, all of a sudden his king is feeling better. But what is happening with this situation f3? Can Hikaru just allow Matlikov to take there?
Well, he probably can. Unless, if you go bishop d2, then there might be a rook a3 check at the end of the line, and that could get really scary really fast.
Agreed. Yeah, no, if your bishop is not on c1, that's a problem. But if this position remains, white has those dark square pawns, which might just be targeted later in the game.
Right. No, this is still very, very uncomfortable for Hikaru, and that is why he's investing as much time as he is, trying to figure out whether to preserve that light-squared bishop.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we actually have seen some moves. They're just knight f6.
This is exactly what's happening. He is bringing his knight to e4.
And you can even think of queen e4, right? These queenless positions are still going to be a problem for white because that's a dark square. The bishop will be able to retreat at some point, and I just feel like this is incredibly unpleasant for Hikaru.
No, it definitely is. And he gets his knight back to d3, and he's trying to activate his own knight and put it on e5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a trade, and now queen e4.
Yep. And now just knight takes e4?
Or maybe even pawn takes and then put the knight on d5. That bears some consideration as well.
And Matlikov, he likes what you're thinking. And if this rook goes to a1, where is this knight going? Okay, well, he goes to a4 instead, but knight comes to e2, and he wants some kind of knight g4 tactic, but then e4.
Apparently that was not the right approach, because now white wants knight c3. And I think Matlikov should consider just making a draw.
Yeah, rook back and forth, and yeah, he's going to do that.
Hikaru
has no
so,
choice.
Given the time situation.
Game is a draw. All right.
Okay, so both move to 4 out of 7, yeah?
Mm-hmm. And Hans with the white piece against Jules Moussard. Opposite colored bishop endgames are not always drawn when one side has more advanced and connected pass pawns.
Yeah, and this is a great example of that because black's pawns have an easy way forward. And I said 4 out of 7. I meant 4 out of 6.
Mm-hmm.
And Jules Moussard will have 4.5 out of 6 after he finishes this endgame conversion off. But it's actually not so trivial because white has 2 passers himself, so you can't really fall asleep on them.
Yeah, that is true. But this check given, that means this king is going to walk up to f4, and then the pawn pushes, and then it feels done.
And then you play bishop c5, and the ultimate problem is that white can't control any of the dark squares ever.
And Danya, this pawn, this corner, and the reason I bring that up is let's say black plays king f5, and we get bishop d7 here, takes, like h6, and you start trying to throw your pawns because there's only one bishop. And then if king g5, right, now all of a sudden this pawn is gone, that is not going to win because the king is too fast. So you need to time these things well, where you just check, and the king goes back, and then I guess now the bishop can come to d4 to cover the square, so that if, in the event of this, you're going to have to give up your c and your h pawn, right? So if h8, here, the king can actually just come right back. Oop, I can't draw arrows. King here and bishop d4. So,
but what you're saying is that even if you, in some way, white found a way to get to the f3 pawn, wherever that pawn would be, it would still be completely winning, provided the black's king would be close to the queen side.
Right. The king just goes over there and wins the game. So instead, we've seen. Oh no, we have. Wait, he gave the pawn?
Oh my God, king e4. Oh, and is this a draw now? It is a draw. Black can't make progress.
Oh,
how did that happen?
Goodness, he rushed that decision. He has so much time on his clock.
Wait, where exactly did he make the decisive, well, not the decisive mistake, the mistake that lets the win slip?
He moved his king back right away.
Oh my gosh. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And he rushed it. He had 2 minutes, as you said.
Yeah, he did not have to play that quickly. He could have just thought he was up a piece, right? He knew that he should be winning. And so Hans escapes with that half point. Let's go back.
And that's a big result. Yeah, let's go back.
Okay, it was right here. It's exactly what we're talking
Bishop
about.
C5. How do you not play Bishop C5 check?
You need to throw in the check. Instead, he went this way. The players are trash talking, by the way. Can you see that in the game chat?
Oh, I can. Oh, they're going after each other big time.
Yeah.
And Jules Rissard can only blame himself.
Yep. Yeah, he only has himself to blame because moving the king back completely unnecessary when you can check the king first, then get your bishop here, and then bring your king to hunt down this pawn.
That's an inexcusable oversight. I mean, you can't leave half a point like this on the table in the RCC, and then complain when you don't qualify.
Right. And you can understand maybe some of his concern that, oh, here's C5, I can't take this pawn. And if I go here, there's C6, right? That's the concern if you're thinking in this direction. But as you're pointing out, king F5, use your bishop to cover this pawn, use your king to chase down this pawn. Your king is in the box. You're doing a lot of endgame lessons, and the king is in the box. This one is covered. So this king can't even touch the F pawn. Yeah,
you just make assignments, right? You assign the H pawn to the bishop, and the king stops the C pawn. And as you pointed out, very important insight that the A pawn is of the right color. The promotion square is a dark square, and you have a dark squared bishop. So Jules Mussard leaving half a point on the table, and both players move to 4 out of 6. And we've got just a handful of games still left, including the legend Gatakamsky
yeah,
we have flagged.
Exactly.
And you know exactly what's going to happen here.
Right? Dubov is just going to flag him because he knows that Kamsky doesn't really pre-move. This position is a dead draw. And I think that if I'm Dubov, I push this pawn up, hope that Kamsky check here. Do whatever you want. You're going to win the clock.
I mean, you can even trade rooks and go, oh, the one thing you can't do is repeat moves. Oh, and he does it right.
Yeah, he takes B7. He'll go back and flag him.
Now, some players would even manage it. Like Andrew Tang would probably draw this with 6 seconds. Whoa! He gave him a draw.
See, okay. That is what you call ultimate respect. And I actually, for competition's sake, you're like, Dubov, what are you doing? But when you know who Gatakamsky is, if you've been in the chess world, if you're a top player like Daniil Dubov, you know exactly who that FFL is. That is a famous freaking legend in Gatakamsky. He's played for a world championship against Anatoly Karpov. He is a 5-time US champion. That is like, you know what? I respect you too much to flag you. And I have to give respect to Dubov for not just beating God on the clock.
You absolutely have to tip your hat to anyone who makes this decision. No question about that. Of course, with that being said, I'm still surprised. And I don't think a single soul in the universe would have blamed Dubov for bagging the full point, especially in a situation where he needs every half a point that he can get. But nonetheless, great respect to Dubov. And, so many chess players have a very, very high level of class and a high level of mutual respect, which makes it even more fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. So really nicely done there. Really good gesture. And I know that FIDE is offering fair play awards and things like that. I would like to, nominate this moment, if we can clip it and ship it to FIDE, because Magnus Carlsen, he won the first Fair Play Award named after Gligorich, if I'm not mistaken, for resigning that game to Ding Liren after Ding disconnected and lost the previous game in the Champions Chess Tour. So I'm going to nominate this moment from Daniil Dubov, not flagging the legend, who is very famous.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Well, we have Levon Aronian versus Dmitry Ondrakin now. So this should be a fun one.
God, Dmitry is he's always there. Right? He's always circling around the top 5. Every single RCC. His level of consistency is unreal.
Yeah, and you look at all these players on screen here. We're talking about Ondrakin, we're talking about Aronian, and we're just again to remind you that Alexander Kostenyuk, Jeffrey Zhang, Hans Niemann, and Parham Maksud. We haven't talked about Parham today, Don.
No, he's sort of flown under the radar. How is he doing? I don't think he's doing all that well today, but he's been playing, putting in the grind, doing most of the RCCs, and I think he won one of them, right? When he defeated Jeffrey Zhang in the final. So
yeah, and then we got to talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo and Kevin Durant stuff.
Oh, that's right. That was awesome. That was a very memorable week.
It really was. And well, Giannis and KD might be watching now because it's not like they have basketball to play, but Harham, he's still trying to get back to those KOs and KO the competition.
Well, Stephen Curry will be watching too if the Warriors continue playing like they will, because they'll get swept. So they'll be joining us for next weekend's RCC.
Well, those players have no choice regardless. Once their match is over, there's no more to play. So this position, Danya, castles, it's very tame. I'm going to go somewhere else just because I feel like these players, they're like, we're getting to that point where if you offer me a draw, I'm not going to say no.
It's an Andrakin kind of position, and we've got Fedoseev and Hikaru playing Jeffrey. That's a great matchup.
Oh my gosh.
Especially because they're in a Dutch.
And does this remind you of anything? Because it reminds me of, the 2019 U.S. Championship when in the last round, Hikaru beat Jeffrey with the Dutch?
Jeffrey. I totally remember what you're saying. Yeah, that was a nice game.
And that won Hikaru his fifth, I want to say, U.S. championship. If I remember that correctly. Yes, he's a 5-time champion. So that was his fifth championship. He beat Jeffrey in the final game with the Dutch. Although right here in this game, Danya, this pawn H4, it's one of those situations where I feel like you'd want that pawn back in some ways, but you are stopping G5, or so it would seem. But don't count out the future possibility of G5 to rip open the H file.
Well, the course of the game, I think, will depend quite heavily on whether Hikaru castles kingside right now, or either castles queenside or decides to keep his king in the center for the time being. So right now he's sort of delaying the decision, moving the bishop back to f7 and paving the way for e7, e5, which of course could be very, very scary because the bishop on d3 and knight on f3 are vulnerable to a fork.
Mm-hmm. So Jeffrey now thinking here, you can make moves like pawn to c5. It looks like you're just giving away a pawn. But with knight a4 as a follow-up, you get it right back. And that could open up this bishop. It's a London bishop, right? Like that's a piece you want seeing the full diagonal. So c5 is a move I would highly consider right now.
Yeah, especially because if you allow black to castle and then maybe go knight f6 to g4, once black plays e5, it feels like he solved all of his problems.
For sure.
So this is the time to strike.
Although c5, dc, knight a4, I'm just running this queen a5 because you want to keep your d pawn here. I wanted just to take on c5 and take back with my queen. But if my d pawn has to go, then this bishop has an open diagonal. This knight will come to d5, and I'm not 100% sold. Although I'm now realizing the e5 square becomes white. So it's
but black can go knight g4 there.
Okay, so just to put that on the board, takes, knight a4, queen a5. And after, say, knight takes e5, knight takes pawn takes, instead of knight d5, which gives up the e5 square, you're saying there's moves like knight g4 and e5, e4. And yeah, it's just a kind of a difficult position to.
It's interesting that Yobar thinks white is much better here. I mean, intuitively, it almost seems to me that black is playing for an advantage. I guess maybe bishop c4 creates weaknesses around the center. I don't know exactly what the reason is. Knight d7 might be better because you're attacking c5 as well.
Yeah, no, that's a retreating move. We've had that as a theme of the day. Knight to d7, clearly a better option to attack that pawn and honestly just win it.
That's exactly right. And Jeffrey decides to expand on the queen side of b2, b4, and Hikaru immediately responds with knight h5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he doesn't take that pawn because of rook b1.
Yes.
And will Jeffrey go c5 here?
Will Jeffrey play c5? I mean, he kind of has to aim for it, right?
Well, having said A, you kind of have to say B. But after c5, in that position, I would already consider taking on b4 if I'm Hikaru.
I was thinking just queen to d8 because this bishop is under attack over here. But you're saying I'm going to grab a pawn and after rook b1?
Queen a5? I feel like you've bitten off a little bit more than you can chew because the bishop on f4 is under pressure. The pawn on c5, that bishop on g7 is rearing to go.
I can't just take on d6?
Oh, yeah, I guess you can take on d6. And then, knight f4, the e-file opens. No, I see what you're saying. Okay, so Jeffrey doesn't go c5. He goes bishop h2.
How can you not play c5 at some point, right?
No, now you absolutely have to.
But the thing is, then the queen can just move, and then e4 is a threat forking the pieces.
I get it.
Are you sacking a piece? Is that what you're going to aim for?
That's exactly what I'm aiming for.
Oh, you are a clever little guy, aren't you?
I'm sacrificing Jeffrey Zhang's pieces to be more specific.
But
I'm not as big of a fan of sacking my own.
No, I'm proud of you though. You know me. I'm always like, if I'm not playing, I'm commentating. Who cares? They're not my pieces. I don't have to deal with the consequences. And c5 played. So if queen d8, we're talking about c takes d6, allowing e4, and then taking on e4 twice. You get 3 pawns for your sacrifice piece.
That's a lot, and all of those pawns are massed together in the center. Now, the alternative here is to play d takes e5, but after de, the threat of e5, e4 is incredibly scary. And that pawn on h4, you pointed it out earlier. Now the queen is aiming at the pawn, and if the knight is dislodged from f3, there will be hell to pay on the king side.
Right. So cd, e4, we know that's what the players are thinking about. And Jeffrey plays e4, and it turns out that was an inaccuracy.
Why exactly? And his idea is that if Hikaru plays the tempting f4, then Jeffrey will probably take on d6. But maybe even that position's okay for black after g5.
Wow, just throw your pawns up the board, because that bishop, not the first time today, Danya, we've seen a horrible bishop on h2 just stuck in place. That game between Benjamin Bach and Alexei Serrana earlier in today's festivities.
Yeah, Hikaru loves these kinds of positions, a lot of tension in the center. And I feel like Jeffrey is starting to lose the grip on the position here.
e4, the Hikaru is thinking. He plays f4, so step 1. And after c takes d6, you want to take on d4, but then this knight goes to e2 and pressures both pawns. Danya, you got it. You're the prophet.
I feel like Jeffrey didn't really consider this seriously, because he just thought, oh, c takes d6, and I'm, blasting through in the center. But the problem is that black's center is totally intact, even without the d6 pawn, because of the efforts exerted by the knight on d7 and the bishop on g7, which are fully capable of protecting the e5 pawn. Now, the game isn't over or anything, but that bishop on h2, combined with the pawn pressure on the king side, is really worrying me.
And I really like knight e2, though, because g4, it's one of those ones you think you're going full on for the attack. But after knight takes e5, your pawns are falling quickly. So if you can concretely calculate a variation that punishes white with a g3 or an f3, then go for it. But g4 is like takes, and after you capture back, I take here, and f4 is loose because 3 of my pieces are aiming right at the square. So now's the time for Hikaru to calculate, and he just castles. But Danya, that means his attack won't be quite as potent.
Right, because you won't have a rook on h8, and on the other hand, g4 is still a pretty devastating threat if Hikaru can take care of the f4 pawn.
Right, and the rook is on f8 now, so it gives it one more defender, although the bishop's in the path. And rook d1, and that's a good move from Jeffrey.
Okay, so he's sort of solidifying his center and exerting the queen, as you're pointing out.
And he might just end up with a healthy pass pawn on d6 if Hikaru doesn't find the accurate reply.
And the question for Hikaru is, can he prepare g4? Is there any way that you can overprotect the f4 pawn preliminarily?
I mean, bishop e6 runs right into bishop c4, so I don't like the look of that.
Right, and in that resulting position, you can't really protect the bishop with your queen because you'll lose g5.
Right. The queen actually has a duty over here, and it's defending this pawn. So g4 is very tempting move after move. And this actually, these are the types of positions I love in chess, where every single turn, does it work? Does it work? No, it doesn't work here. Does it work now? Nope, still doesn't work. So I really enjoy that process. And Jeffrey quickly plays bishop c4, and Hikaru brings his rook to e8. So there's a lot of tension here. And Jeffrey was rook to b1. I'm not sure about that one. I guess he's getting off the diagonal, Danya, and maybe thinking about b5, but just feels a little bit like too casual.
It's definitely very slow. So Jeffrey is perhaps over-relying on his defensive mechanism on the queen side. But like I've been saying for the last couple of moves, the moment Hikaru plays g4, if the circumstances are right for him, then things are going to get really, really grim for white on the king side.
Right. Although
Jeffrey's hanging by a thread here.
Yeah, and every single time you want to play g4, we see that pawn chain collapsing immediately because knight takes e5. So don't take this pawn on d6. D takes e5 will be a double attack on this queen, and the position opening up in the center will be great for white. So Jeffrey with rook b1, he might play b5, try to get that rook into the game, and it's not that easy for Hikaru to find a move right now.
Yeah, they're in some sort of a cold war here where neither side wants to flinch, wants to be the one to release the tension until Hikaru does, and he plays he takes d4.
And this e4 pawn is now loose. The rook did just come over to e8, so let's not forget about its purpose there. And it looks like you just take that pawn right back on d4. But if you take with the knight on d4, I'm already looking at g4. That feels extremely tempting because g3 will trap this bishop on h2. And if you take with this knight over here on d4, you're giving up squares like e5 to black's pieces.
And black could just snag the pawn on e4. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that either.
For sure, especially if this knight takes, because now your knights are kind of stuck defending each other.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Although, if you do play rook takes e4, I want to play bishop d3. I'm just going to show that very quickly. Oh, sorry. Got thrown.
I think it's white to move.
Because I want to get my knight to f5 and hope that this gives me some real counterplay. Although you maybe just play rook e5 and stop that altogether.
And I think it's worth showing that rook takes d4 walks into the very classic, old as the hills idea, bishop h7.
Is this?
And rook takes d4.
Wait, this is.
Oh, this is 3 pieces for a queen. So
it's that much. I was like, how is
actually unclear? Black might be better here.
Yeah, I didn't realize
Black is better.
That's too much material.
So we'll see. Now there's a trade on g5, and Jeffrey brings his bishop back to d3. The Evolvar hated that move. And is it because of g4?
G4.
And the knight takes d4, g3?
Yep. You are losing a piece because your take on d4, this knight is needed to do 2 things at the same time. It's needed to defend the knight that came to d4 while protecting the g3 square. So g4, g3, the knight will eventually end up here, and you'll lose the knight that just came to d4.
It's a classic overloading situation, and Hikaru just double checking, but I am 99% sure that we will see that g-pawn move down the board with devastating effect. And I feel like Jeffrey just really struggles against Hikaru in general. I mean, everybody does, but Jeffrey just can't seem to catch a break against Nakamura in the RCC, especially.
No, Hikaru, I mean, he's just playing his sharp style. And for all we've talked about earlier in today's action, that Hikaru was struggling. It didn't seem like he was on his best form. With a victory in this game, he'll go to 5 out of 7. So that would be a great performance, no matter the competition and no matter the week. It seems like Hikaru, he's inching his way towards that top 8, whether or not he starts fast or slow.
You're absolutely right. And Hikaru continuing to contemplate the possibility of G4. What other top games do we have going right now? We have that Andrake and Aronian game, which was kind of colorless. I think it already ended in a draw.
It did indeed.
And Hikaru, by the way, did play G4.
No. Wait, Levon won.
Oh, he did? Oh my God. I mean, I assumed that because the game is over already that it would be a draw.
It looks
but
like
it wasn't. You're right.
Levon won the game.
With black.
Quickly pull that up and
whoa! Andraken just doesn't get mated like this ever.
No, but Levon Aronian's a maestro, and he was able to deliver this. That's a destruction. We'll probably take a look at this one later as well, but let's go back to the live games for now. And what about this one? The big fish. Oh. Okay, protected.
Ranak has offered several draws already. He seems to believe that white has no way to make progress, and he is probably right. F6?
Never play that move. That's what I've been told.
You're funny. Oh, maybe... Does Fedosave have something wild like F4 and G5? No, that would only be the best way to try to lose this position.
Yeah, we like talking about playing for a loss rather than a win. And yeah, the king gets trying to come up, but this king goes to c7. There's no way you're going to get a checkmate. And they also have too much time. So there's no way, at least I don't think that they're going to be able to flag each other.
No, there's zero ways to make progress here. Just even king d7. You don't care if you're pushed back to the last rank, as you said, because the bishop on e5 is doing enough. Bishop c3.
Oh, no.
Blundering a fork.
Oh, no, my bishop.
Right. Just don't blunder it with check.
Right. Don't leave it there too long, because then it's with check. But if you checked and won the bishop, then this pawn was promoting. So the bishop just goes back and forth. Yeah, we don't have to stay here. This is very clearly a game that should be a draw. Why don't we go to this one between... Oh, they just drew.
Why don't we not go to this one?
I just thought Xu Shengyu not always playing in these events and doing quite well with 4.5 out of 7.
Yeah, he's got pretty decent qualification chances, and a little bit below that, we've got Paravian and Parham, and we also have Sigurov against Abdusatorov. Sigurov is in huge trouble here.
Yeah, we see a shoop coming down to G2, right, Daniel?
Yes, we do. And then he's going to pick up F2, and that C pawn is going to move up the board only a couple of spaces away from promotion. But king C6, right? The idea is to get the king away from the knight's line of fire. And bishop C8, there is rook E8, and so he pushes the C pawn to distract the rook and win the knight.
Actually, this was really well done, because if you'd gone rook G2, rook takes F2, then that H pawn was running up the board. So instead, he wins a piece, does Abdusattorov, and he's also up 3 minutes. So he is going just to win this game without, I would imagine, any difficulty.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's quickly hop around. You mentioned Parham and Paravian, and whoa, Paravian down to 20 seconds.
No, but there's no way he's pulling this out. And he continues to think. And I think he had internet problems. There's no way he's taking this long.
Yeah,
he's on 14 seconds. What is he doing?
He's just not there.
I think he's disconnected. Yeah.
He's just gone. And so Parham is going to take this and go to 4.5 to 7. So we've seen Parham on camera a couple times. We haven't seen his games. And
wow, what an anticlimactic finish!
You're right.
He just sits there until he loses on time.
I wonder how long he had to wait. It's one of those situations where you're like, can you just make a move, please? I'd rather just play and lose than wait for 3 minutes as you flag because you were disconnected. But let's keep on going around here. Whoa, what's even material? Yeah, took a while to count.
Okay, and Jules Mussard, after a very frustrating draw against Hans Niemann, I think he's doing a great job rebounding. But rook A2 is a big threat, as you're pointing out.
Clock is in White's favor, so Jules way ahead in the clock, but this is a very big threat. These knights, they're stepping on each other's toes, so maybe this one has to go to E7. I don't like that because of rook A2.
Right, knights are just so ineffective at combining to create actual dangerous threats, while that bishop on A6 could jump into F1 with checkmate if the king ever moves to H3. Yeah, rook A2.
Go knight E7, rook A2. He said goes here.
D6.
He's just allowing the G pawn to be captured because then he'll play rook A2. He doesn't want to give up D5.
I think the likeliest result is a perpetual. After rook takes F2, king G1, black can check on F1. There is no mate, though. You're going to have to settle for a perpetual, especially given the time situation.
And rook D8 check. No, knight E6. King runs away some more. Rook E8, king A7.
Well, the black king is out of the woods officially. Now, how does white, arrange his pieces to minimize the effects of rook takes F2 is the question. Like that. And it's a draw.
Just don't try to win by bringing your king out to H3. You would get mated immediately with bishop to F1.
Yep. Oh, he's going for it, is Mussard.
He wants knight F4.
Oh, very nice.
He's going to win. Look at the clock. Come on.
18 seconds. There's just no way. Even Bortnik shouldn't be able to pull this out.
Probably bring the rook over to the H file at some point.
King G1, I would play.
Knight F4. Rook F3.
But I think this is okay.
Just go back. Just flag it.
Robert, I'm not sure he's going to make it happen.
I think he's going to make it happen.
He would have loved to keep the knights on the board. If you can keep the knights on the board, it's over because of the possibility of a fork. Now,
rook to H8.
Bortnik is fast.
He's not just fast. He's a speed demon.
I don't think he has this. I don't think he has it because you came with your king as a rook E8. King F3. Okay, he goes here.
You just get free move, and Mussard very crafty there.
Mm-hmm. King D1 and flag him.
You're right.
Flag him.
You're right.
Yeah, this is a flag.
You're absolutely right. This is easy because he's got all the back rank checks.
Where's Daniil Dubov when you need him to offer?
Right. Oh, hop.
Take this pawn.
Hop.
Rook E8. Rook E8. Oh, he got the pawn just in time.
And he couldn't trade rooks in time. If he had 0.3 more seconds.
Wow. What the heck? That was so close. Wow. Oh my gosh. And
I have no words, and what a frustrating loss for Alexander Bortnik.
We were saying, just to show everybody, that you could put the rook on E8 here because Bortnik was pre-moving king to C3. So if you play rook to E8 and a king to C3, then you just take the rook.
But that's dangerous because Bortnik might have also thought about that and pre-moved rook takes C8 just to take a gamble. So you never know, right? It's total luck.
But there's no risk, right? Because it's stalemate. So at least you're not losing the game.
That's true. But in any case, Jules Mussard pulls it out, a very nice endgame effort. rebounding after that frustrating draw and moving to 5 out of 7. Well, that concludes round 7, which means we have 2 rounds to go, Robert. And Levon Aronian atop the tournament right now with 6 out of 7.
Yeah, and we see Big Fish just behind him, and Raunik Sidwani, second week in a row with a great result. And as we look down toward the top 8, we see Hans Niemann, who has struggled in many of these RCC events. We talk about he's playing from a new location every week. He's playing over the board events. I think his next one is in Prague. So it's good to see Hans doing well there. And Nordibeka Busatar, Hikaru Nakamura, Jules Moussard, and last but certainly not least there is Billy Kimba. Piggy Blinders comes back, but Maxim Matlikov has been here in the RCC week after week, doing quite well. So Jeffrey Zhang, he's the odd man out right now. He lost that game to Hikaru.
Yes, he did, and we're in for a very exciting climax as the top 8 spots are yet to be determined, and we will see who qualifies to tomorrow's knockout. But first, a very short break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Rapid Chess Championship brought to you by Coinbase. We'll be back with the final 2 rounds on the other side of this short break.
can't film me in the bathroom, man. Yes.
Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. And Robert, we are missing action in the Hikaru Nakamura versus Levon Aronian game. We have an incredible position, and they're moving their queens back and forth. Oh my god.
Wow, what a game that was. A masterpiece. When you look at their best game collections, we will see this one undoubtedly. For Levon Aronian, it makes perfect sense. It was 6.5 out of 8. He's locked himself up a top 8 spot. And for Hikaru, now he goes to 5.5 out of 8. And we saw Jeffrey heading into this round was in 9th place with 4.5 out of 7. I think Hikaru needs to be a little bit careful. The last round, he probably can't just afford to make a quick draw. It depends if the tie breaks work out. But it does make sense for Levon, to be sure.
Somehow I think Hikaru is aiming for a draw in the last round, because if he did this with the white pieces, unless he plays someone who he really feels like he can beat with black, I think we can expect a quick draw in the last round as well. Because 6 out of 9 qualifies you 90 to 95% of the time.
Yeah, that's true. But it sometimes requires you to have tie breaks, and Hikaru should be pretty decent, but you never know. So we'll see how that one plays out. But for now, we have 2 players who are actually battling out over the board here in round 8. Fedoseev with the black pieces, Nordibek Abdusattar with the white pieces. And the last move played done in knight d7. I guess that knight might be heading for c5 and an eventual f5, but white hops in and has that great control with the pawns and the d5 square.
Yeah, without question, white is objectively better in these types of positions, but Fedoseev likes dynamic positions where he's got play against his opponent's king, and I think we're going to see f5 at some point. He moves his knight back to e6, preparing knight d4. Okay.
And that's a
Probably
really important
bishop f3.
Yeah, because if the bishop went to h5, I think white was ready to play g4 and lock that bishop out. But look at Fedoseev go. He would love nothing more. If you take this is a strategically horrible decision for everyone watching. This bishop is bad. Black wants to put a knight on d4, but not to take this bishop. It just wants to sit on a dark square where maybe one of your knight can trade off for one of the knights, but the other will replace it on d4.
So in response to bishop takes c3, white, of course, will play f takes c3, taking the d4 square under control. And this happened. I think Vladimir wants to go queen g5 and essentially trade the d4 square for damaged pawn structure.
Right. For whenever pawns are doubled, they're open files. And so the f file is open. And also this d file, knight f6 check, is just a check. The king slides to h8. It's not going to crush black. So it's a b4 played. And I guess his bishop can follow behind the pawn.
Yeah, and then maybe c5 at some later point. So there are some storm clouds that are gathering around black's king. Anytime there's a queen on g4, you're pointing out rook takes f7 ideas. You can't really fall asleep on that. And I don't know if I love Vladimir's decision to take on e3. We'll see how that pans out in the next couple of moves.
Yeah. Okay, a5, that makes sense, trying to open up the queen side. And if you play b5, we were talking about before, give me the dark squares. I would even consider taking on d5 and then putting my knight on c5 if you played b5. So a3, the other move, just to keep the tension. And after ab, the rook covers the other rook, and then it'll be a fight for the newly open file.
Right. So a lot of tension on the board here. And Fedoseev has to decide how he's arranging his pieces, what pieces he's trading, whether he takes on d5 at some point. And that's highly inadvisable in the current position because of e takes d5, reopening that beast of a bishop on c2.
Right. And then knight on e6 is nowhere to hop to. You have to go back to c7, and you're not trying to back up like that. You want to go to d4 to c5, but that's why the pawns are exactly where they are. No progress for your knights. And this knight on d5, Danya, it's keeping black really at bay. You can't get a queen to b6, which would put pressure on multiple pawns. So if you could combine knight takes d5 with queen b6, maybe that's worth thinking about, but opening up the bishop seems to be a very bad decision.
Yeah, it's hard to find a move here for black. I'm honestly quite shocked that it's only giving 0.00. I would say that practically black's position is very unpleasant. Maybe you should play a semi-waiting move like king h8.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength there.
Save goes knight c6. So he leaves the knight on d5 alone.
And he's not actually threatening anything because that knight defends the pawn. So bishop a4, not out of the question if you want to think about taking, but actually that doesn't help because you're getting your own knight kicked out of the position. So is there a rook lift, rook f3, a takes b? And I'm already thinking, can I just start
rook
sacrificing
f1.
My queen side over here to go for tactics, but I'm not quite sure it will pan out. So I need to think a little more on that.
You would have loved for your light squared bishop to be involved, and Noterbeck tries to involve his h-pawn, moving it up to h5, or maybe just taking the g5 square under control, preventing queen g5.
Oh, that's a really good call, because I was just saying, let's go rook f3, but maybe at some point queen g5 could be an option for black, just forcing the queens off the board.
No, that was a great, very alert prophylactic move, and now Fedoseev does play king h8, so both sides kind of making surface level improvements to their position, and Noterbeck brings his bishop up to d3, supporting the c4 pawn.
So where's that bishop going? Is it just purely defense? Oh, that move apparently is not good.
Knight b6, knight d7.
Oh, and that's such an easy thing to overlook. I mean, he did overlook
and then f5,
it.
rook takes f5 at the end.
Yes, because your queen protects the knight via tactical measures of rook takes f8. So knight b6, where's this rook even going? Rook b8 walks into a fork, and after knight b6, rook a6, you'll eventually walk into a b5. So rook maybe sits on a7, but it doesn't matter.
Or you might even walk into c5. So I agree. I think knight b7, rook a, knight b6, rook a7 is a very, very sad necessity. And then knight d7 comes with even greater effect than if the rook was still on the 8th rank.
Yes. And I like that Noterbeck is thinking here, because he's the type of player where, he can spot tactics everywhere, but now, and there it is. So I could tell he was going to find it. I was getting to that point that he's sitting, he's thinking, he saw it as an option, and he wanted to confirm. And Fedoseev knows he blundered. That's why he played this move so quickly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Vladimir, who was leading with 5 out of 5, it appeared that qualification is a bygone conclusion. He's gotten half a point out of his last 3 games, assuming that he loses this one, and he will need at least a draw to qualify in the next round, in the final round.
Yeah, his tiebreak should be good, but you don't want to rely on tiebreaks, especially when you're 5 out of 5. So queen b6, I like that move going after the e3 pawn. I think that this queen, it's done its duty. Let's retreat. He goes to f3 instead, just to keep the rook tied down. And is he looking for this done? It a takes and like queen takes f7.
Yeah, but there's knight c7 here, I'm afraid. And then after a takes b4, I think you can get away with knight takes b4, because the knight from c7, in case of necessity, as you're pointing out, can move to a6.
Wow, that's very unappealing on the surface, but let's not be surface level. Let's calculate. Knight c7, a b4, knight b4, walking into a pin. And it does appear that white has something here. And I guess maybe we just go for this, but there's knight a6.
Is there some sort of C? No.
There's no C. I was thinking about a C. Maybe can we just here, and you can't move your knight because you lose b7. So maybe just
just something quiet.
Yeah, but it's pretty ridiculous. It does make sense after we went through it. And all right, b3, I can understand that. In fact, maybe it's even better.
That's a lovely move, because as you're saying, that pawn can be supported with a knight, and you're buying yourself as much time as possible, keeping the queen side closed for as long as possible. And Noterbeck has made a hash of this.
What does he even do here? Because actually, I think that Fedoseev is about to take over this game. Knight c7, knight e6, knight c5. And, it may sound laughable considering Fedoseev is the one who blundered and his knight had to go back to 8. But now there's no active play for white, and the weaknesses are all in his camp.
Yeah, I spoke way too soon. And in the span of 4 minutes, he's turned this game around completely. I think white has to very seriously contemplate bishop c2 and try to find a way to get to that pawn at all costs. Maybe like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that pains us both, I believe. And knight a5 takes... Actually, look at this. Bishop e2, knight a5, bishop d1. Can I take? Because after rook takes b3, there's knight d2.
Knight d2, and the knight on a8 is defending the queen.
Yeah, it's the heroic piece that we didn't know we needed.
Incredible. Great catch. Okay.
Say, look at him on camera here. He's locked in.
Totally. He knows that this game is critical. If he wins this game, he doesn't even have to worry about the last round. And instead, Noterbeck, he's not even going to try to win that pawn.
And yeah, it feels like he's just going all over the place, right? He went to the queen side, back to the king side, queen h3. We see it. He wants to go here, but you're attacking this, and you can't even get away with queen d7 because e3 is hanging. This rook takes f7. That's something that you don't want to overlook. And that is why Fedoseev opened his queen back up to the d8 square. So just a move ago, let's say you made some random move like queen a5. rook takes f7, rook takes led to a back rank checkmate. But with the knight out of the way, d8's covered.
And the other subtlety was that knight e6 would have walked into queen takes c6. So Fedoseev just takes the alternate route and he goes through a6. And you were right on the money when you said as soon as the knight reaches c5, black is going to take over the game. And as you can see from the eval bar, it is now black who's got a very significant advantage, total positional domination. That bishop on b1, well, let's just say it's seen better days.
I don't know if I want to say that. You know, that bishop on 1 looks great. Why you got to hate on it?
Yeah, bad bishops defend bad pawns.
Yeah, this is really, really bad for white. I mean, the thing is, black doesn't have to do anything. How is white going to threaten something?
Rawr.
That's the exact sound effect I was thinking about. So thank you for giving the Ben Feingold impression. And c4 now is targeted. I think in a game between two grandmasters, black wins this position like 90% of the time.
Right.
Maybe more. Oh.
I don't know though. Rook c1, knight a4. But now Noterbeck has a very small window of opportunity in which black's king isn't really surrounded by a lot of pieces. So you got to try to go h5, maybe h6, and try to create a weakness on the f6 square, sink a rook onto that square, and get something going, even if it means sacking the bishop at some point.
All right, no, I can buy that. I think that what he's doing, sending those pawns, makes perfect sense. He's also causing Fedoseev to think. And there are various options. G6 is not entirely out of the question either. After HG, play H5 and just try to open up that king. So H5, H6, H5, G6. And Fedoseev takes because he's going to follow up with B5.
Greedy boy. And is there queen e6 here? No, then still b5.
That's such a cool move, though. Even if it doesn't work, it's just fun to play it.
All right, and then you can resign after your brief moment in the sun.
Right, but it feels good. At least if you're going to lose the game, you got to play queen e6 to put your queen on pre and it can't be captured.
And instead, he gets down to business and pushes the pawn up to h5. And I really think this is a 3-result game.
Yeah.
I mean, h6 is coming. G6 is coming. Fedoseev is not going to sleep peacefully here. And g6, h6, then queen e6 is going to be very, very strong because it's going to attack f7.
G6.
Oh, but he fell. But then there's f6 at the end.
Yeah. No,
you see what I'm saying?
If we just go back a move here, right? Instead of G6, the move that I guess white should have played, it looks like it's just a calmer move because H6 is what you want to do. But after G6, Queen F3, as you're saying, something like this or
Queen E7, yeah.
Yeah, just cover up on the squares here.
Yeah, there's not enough infiltration squares, and after G6, F6, Fedoseev can totally lock up the king side if he wants with H6.
But then he has that permanent back rank issue, and is there a Queen E6 take here? I think it's too slow.
Well, Knight C5.
Yeah, Knight C5, and you can even push this pawn to B2 at some moment.
Yeah, as long as you leave one of the knights to defend B2, you're good.
Okay, Rook F2.
Okay.
B2, 2 knights defend, so it's all right. Rook B1, there's knight takes A3.
Yeah, and then you're going to... Oh, you can't even sack the exchange on B2 because you're going to lose the rook at the end of the line after Queen C1.
It's really sad. So Rook F1. Is there ever a sacrifice here?
I can't really see that happening. The queen on C7 is very nicely positioned. And now it's on E7.
Saying everything is covered here. How is this not like -10?
I don't understand that either.
Doesn't it look completely over?
Yeah, it does, because Black's going to go knight takes A3, or... I guess it's not that easy to actually make progress. Even after you play knight takes A3, how do you follow up? And now there's rook C8 in response to knight takes A3.
There's B1, rook takes B1, knight takes A3, but as you're saying, even this move rook C8, and the bishop covers the B1 rook, and just going for kind of a pretty big attack. If that rook gets up here, it's white's game all of a sudden.
Yeah, queen D7 there was a big threat if you had gone rook C8. And Vladimir takes care of that with queen B7. Very nice prophylactic move.
Right. And now this rook wishes it, was not on C2. B1, knight takes A3 ideas are just fully in the air. If the queen moves away, knight takes E3 will be a fork of rooks.
Yeah. I mean, what really hurts white is that queen E6 always walks into knight C5. So you can never really infiltrate here.
Yeah, no, nice retreating move, forking the queen and the bishop. And now Fedoseev is also up a minute. So maybe we should go somewhere else. It looks like Fedoseev, he is well on his way. Jules Moussard at 6 out of 8, by the way. So
Wow.
Jules is winning some games. And what did we just tune into over here?
I think we tuned into probably a winning position for Jeffrey. He's up an exchange. That took me a while to realize.
Yeah, I was trying to
up an
count the
exchange.
pieces. And if Queen H5, I guess he can even throw in a G6 at some point, even though I'm worried about ever pushing that pawn.
Yeah, this was clearly a game in which Matthias sacrificed in exchange for a kingside attack, but that attack has largely fizzled out.
And it's interesting because I don't really associate Matthias often with like sacrificing pieces. I see him as like a very strong positional player, and maybe he will regret that this turned tactical and not in his favor.
There's still some chances. The Rook G1. Don't shovel dirt on him yet. I mean, there's still some meat on the bone here.
Yeah, this queen is kind of stuck defending this rook.
Yeah, knight G4 to E5 is possible at some point. Rook can go to F1 or G1, so this is by no means elementary. And Queen F7 might have been a pretty serious inaccuracy. It puts the queen in harm's way.
But how can you blame Jeffrey? Not that you were, but how can anyone blame Jeffrey for doubling the rooks like this, keeping everything connected? But it was a mistake. So even the most natural looking moves sometimes have flaws.
And I think he's sacking his exchange back. But if you go knight F6 too hastily, black will take and then take on E3. And so Matthias tries to keep the tension instead.
Be very careful here if you're Jeffrey. Like if you overlook a rook takes F8 and gets the H7 square, I don't think it actually works out tactically speaking. So for Jeffrey, can he even think about? He has rook F7.
God, this is so scary. Rook G1.
Knight H6 is coming.
Yeah, you could throw in knight G6 to plug the G file, but then the queen will slide up probably to H5 or G5, and that could get even scarier.
Oof. Queen E7, so knight H6, rook
takes. So this
takes.
forces white's hand.
It does. But if you get there, what's black's next move? Is like bishop F5?
No, but white is fine there, I think. This is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Blue Bomb doesn't want to do it. He wants to keep the tension.
And look at the clock, by the way. Both players are on 125 now, and this is a big game. They need to win to have chances to make it to tomorrow's action.
Yeah, a draw is a very undesirable result for both of them, although a win in the last round would go a very, very long way.
Ooh. Okay,
Bishop E8. Look at that defensive cocoon that Jeffrey has assembled on king side.
And he refuses to play knight H6 check. Does like again? Is
knight F4 still doesn't want to do it,
and that apparently was a big mistake for.
Yeah, but it's impossible to make any.
Oh my gosh! Because now
Queen
after you
E3
do this,
in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Queen E3, you blocked your own queen's access to the square. In which case, you're going to lose material.
He overcooked it.
Yeah,
I mean, he had so many chances to play knight H6, but you just kept the steak on the barbecue, and now it's it's too well done.
Yeah, I'm definitely not eating that. So, oh gosh, all of a sudden Jeffrey has the easy. Bishop takes G4, and the attack fizzles out. There are not enough pieces remaining once this knight goes off the board, and the attackers and this knight on F8 is a great defender.
Are you saying you wouldn't eat if I cooked for you? Or you're hurting my feelings.
Well, I mean, we need steak regardless because I don't eat meat. But if it's overcooked, that just sounds disgusting.
I used to get steak well done. Fun fact, and it's over. It's just over. The funny thing is, you can find he's probably going to play knight H6 at last, but it's way too late.
And Queen F3, and then you take this rook, and then you lose your queen at the end, and black's 2 pieces ahead. That actually might be what we'll see. Or F5, and excuse me, can I take?
You sure can, and he did.
And you just walked into a checkmate. It was losing regardless, and that means that Jeffrey Zhang was the 5.5 out of 8. So he was in 9th entering the round. He'll be in the top 8 after it, and it looks like Matthias just gonna let his clock fall.
Yep. And that was a frustrating loss for Matthias, who had a lot of chances there. He resigns the game and makes it official. And we've got only a couple of games remaining. A time scramble here in Dubov-Hansen. This is a dead draw. But the side of the knight always has the practical edge. Eric should be able to hold this, though.
Knight F5. So white can kind of play this forever, which is annoying. And Dubov, he is up a second, but there's nothing to attack.
Well, Dubov basically needs to go 2 out of 2 to give himself any chance.
Eric might flag him.
You think so?
No.
No.
I was gonna say, like, Eric was a little bit having the clock, and Eric seems to be the better bullet player between the two, but they're both are eliminated because they drew. They need to win. And how about this game? Serrana and Shigirov, and Shigirov's going to flag him.
Yeah, this should be a pretty straightforward win. Unless Shigirov blunders into a rook trade by accident.
Who did Shigirov flag earlier? It was Bortnik, right?
Well, it was Bortnik, and then he beat Jospim in that very impressive. It wasn't really a flat-out time scramble. I mean, he just outplayed him in a, in very rapid fashion. And, and a good attempt by Alexei, but it ain't going to fly.
That was a great try and great patience by Shigirov not to start pre-moving, because so many players at this moment here would be like, all right, I'll just pre-move king f6 or king whatever, some kind of king move. And after rook a5, it's important that you weren't hovering around your king. Instead, just picks up the rook and wins the game with plenty of time to spare.
Yeah, you got to realize that when you've got 7 seconds and your opponent has 1, you literally don't need to make a single pre-move, even if your opponent is pre-moving. So round 8 is over. Round 9 has already begun. And we're going to see a bunch of draws at the top. Probably Aronian Musard.
Draw.
Aronian certainly doesn't mind a draw.
Yeah, he'll get first place. So when is this game going to be drawn? I'm also just looking at the standings. Has anyone drawn yet? I don't see.
Wow. What do you think Hikaru? I wonder what Hikaru is going to do.
Well, someone just finished. It looks like Big Fish finished at 7-9, as does Billy Kimba. They drew their game. So
okay, that makes sense.
Fedoseev happily at the top. And I wonder if Levon, he's just like, I'm the stronger player. I have the white pieces. Why not try to win first and get the 1 seed and get the white piece in the rapid games tomorrow?
I mean, I like that attitude, and I think that's a very Levon thing to do.
Yeah.
I say as he probably will offer a draw in the next 2 moves.
Well, yeah, we'll see about that. So Hikaru's still playing against Sadwani. Let's just go back and forth. I mean, we can see how the games are developing.
Hikaru's got white again.
Yeah. And so he might try to get a win in this game and get
he's
higher
definitely playing.
placement. All right, so Hikaru, let's keep going, just so we can see all of the games. Wow, okay, they're fighting here.
Wow.
Yeah, Andreken and Jeffrey Zhang are entering some very feisty territory. Bishop h4, g5, knight sacrifice. You take back. There's a pin here. Oh gosh.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that this is like a worse version of a Botvinnik for white. Okay, now he brings his knight to c3. I'm somehow not sold on the way Andreken is handling this so far. Bishop b4? I don't know.
So you're saying that black's extra pawn will play a huge part in this game, and you don't feel like white has sufficient competition?
No, I mean, especially because you've given away your dark squared bishop, and the bishop on b4 is going to be very, very stable. And okay, so Jeffrey plays a6.
I actually really like that move.
A takes b5 and knight takes b5. There's probably some sort of a knockout. Yeah, probably a sacrifice.
Take, and you take the rook.
Bishop b4, yeah.
And your king is either going up, or you're making like knight to d2, in which case d4 will eventually fall after bishop to b7.
Or even the immediate queen d4.
Oh, because you protect your knight, tactically speaking, with this check. So that's kind of cool.
So, you're right. Black should start with bishop b7 there. But anyways, a fianchetto from Andreken, the same from Jeffrey, and a standoff between the light-squared bishops. This is an incredibly complex position.
Yep. So bishops stare down. I wonder who's going to do something for. Okay, I was going to say, is c5 going to be played? Because it does seem to lose a pawn here. But after c takes d4, this knight on f3 can't capture back. The bishop is loose.
Right. Yeah, these positions are very, very hard to make sense of, just because of how much is going on in the center and on the sides of the board, and how unconventional the pawn structure is. So we'll keep an eye on this very important game. A draw probably benefits both players, but it appears that neither of them is really thinking about peace right now.
No, these two are definitely in for a fight. How about Arjun? So he's at 5 out of 8, and that means he's just outside of the top. He's not in the top 8 right now, but if he wins and there are some draws, he might be able to find himself in tomorrow's action. With the white pieces, Danya, he's up a pawn for the time being. This pawn can be captured on c5, but it looks like white just has this stronghold of the e5 square, and this pawn on h6. Don't count it out. Knight c5, queen d4, and there's already knight g4 as a threat, trying to deliver checkmate.
Yeah, I mean, I personally hate playing against a pawn on h6 that's sitting there permanently like a splinter, because you're always, as you're saying, have to worry about these types of tactics.
Yeah, this is not looking too fun for Shigeru. And he's
Oh,
been flagging.
Hikaru drew.
Hikaru drew, okay. So he moves up into the 6 out of 9, and that gives players like Arjun or Shigeru a chance, right? They start winning and tying, and they may have better tie breaks.
Well, Hikaru has pretty good tie breaks. I mean, Raunak actually has better tie breaks at the moment. Now, the tie breaks will update after all of the games are finished. So take what you see right now with a serious grain of salt.
Yep. And okay, let's see what's up with Levon Aronian, because he is. Oh, there's a previous game. Sorry. I was like, well, what is that? That looks different.
I mean, that was a nice final position, though.
Yeah, that was. And we have Levon's position here. Yeah, this is looking. Wait, it's count. Nope, even material. Okay. Oh.
Levon declined to draw, interestingly enough, a couple of moves ago, it appears.
And he just stole a pawn. So why should he just agree on the draw?
Well, because rook takes f2, and I think black wins the pawn back. Rook c1 and rook c2.
Rook c1 is important. So rook f2, bishop f2, rook c1 check, just to force the king away, and then play rook c2. And if you play bishop d4, thinking you are going to go deliver a checkmate, after rook takes g2 check, if you take, there's bishop to e4, and that wins back the sacrifice rook.
Yeah, this should all be pretty simple. And Musard, he didn't go rook takes f2. Instead, he allowed a trade of rooks, and now Levon is gonna milk this forever.
For sure. White's up a pawn. No risk whatsoever.
Zero.
A rook trade would be very good. So maybe Jules should play rook. I would say rook c8, bishop f5, trying to get the rook to c2. But instead, it goes like this. Danya, I know it should be a draw. We both know that.
Right.
But it just starts to feel like a position that Levon can play forever. And there might become a moment where Jules has to find like some only decision, and it's not going to be easy.
And I don't know if I like the move g5 either, because now black's pawn structure is a little damaged on the king side, and white has this pathway, as you're pointing out. And if black plays h4, well, that fixes the pawn on a dark square where the bishop can target it. So Levon, has a dream position here that he can just enjoy for as long as he wants.
And if this king either goes up this way or darts over here for the queen side, there's no guarantees that a rook trade necessarily means the game should end in the draw. So we often think that bishops are opposite color, draw. Not always the case, especially with white being up a pawn and this king either darting this way or, as we see, incoming up to g3 and maybe to h4.
And the h-pawn is, the right color. So if you get a scenario where you force black to give away the bishop 4 and a-pawn, you're happy to be left with an h-pawn. And here comes Levon's king.
He might play
He's
g3.
going to park it on h4 and play g3. Yep.
Yeah, no, this is going to be a long battle for sure. So let's come back to this one. Oh,
yeah, Hikaru made a draw.
Oh, yeah, that just was still there in the games list. So let's go.
Whoa!
What in the world is happening between these two?
Oh my God. Is somebody down? How many pawns is Andraken down?
Hold on.
Okay, not that many, actually.
Oh, I thought black sacrificed a piece for these pawns.
No, he's just up 2 pawns. Material, like minor piece count is equal.
What? Okay, is there
This is wild.
Like a knight d6, queen?
Queen d6, queen f7, king d8. The problem is that e5 there hangs with check.
And if I move my queen like to f5 to go knight f7, your king starts running away. So you're right. That seems overly ambitious, perhaps.
What if you castle queenside?
So many options there. Castle queen, knight takes c5.
Oh my God, it's impossible to calculate this. And both sides are now down to 6 minutes. Here's an idea. Castle's queenside de, knight f7, queen f7, rook d8, king e7, and black wins. So instead of rook d8, I guess you go queen e5 check, and you force a perpetual. Queen e7, queen h5.
And what if you play on? You're like, oh, your king's in the center.
No, but even just 7, yeah, but okay.
That's actually a really key move, because you would think there would be some pressure. I don't care if the eval bar goes down. It's just clearly black is winning with 2 minor pieces.
I feel like there's a non-zero chance that the game ends in exactly that way. I mean, Andraken is going to castle if he doesn't find anything better.
And it kind of has to go for that if you're Jeff. You can't afford to leave these pieces in the center, especially with the rook coming to e1, then knight d6 threat. So knight takes c5 though, Danya. We got to think about that one as well.
Yeah, what happens there? I mean, black probably can't take on c5. Not even probably, definitely can't.
Oh, and he goes.
Okay. Oh, and now he castles.
Oh, this bishop also is hanging over here. I forgot about that.
This is terrifying for black.
Yeah, d5 is a target. b7 is hanging. If you take here, bishop takes d5, and this rook is going to be loose in like every variation.
Right. So worst comes to worst, so I can always pick up that rook and, claim the extra exchange.
No, it doesn't work. No, never mind. This bishop being loose, I forgot about that for a second.
So what if knight d7 here? I'm going to try to give you that rook on h8, but consolidate my king position.
So knight d7, and if I take on d5, no, your queen's protected. Yeah, your queen's
95.
Protected. So you just end up taking this, and this is all protected. That's obviously a problem. If you take this way, then there's this knight d3 check after the rook goes to b8.
Yeah, also the queen is almost trapped there.
Yeah, true. So that's not going to pan out. Knight d7 is played.
We're about to find out what Dmitry has up his sleeve. It could be as simple as, knight takes d7 and queen f6 check, but I felt that plays into black's hands. King c7, maybe that's how you go. No, that's not the right approach.
So
that's not the right approach.
Yeah,
bishop g7 wins the queen.
Oh, because bishop b2, duh. Nasty. So rook e1, and that was a mistake. So Dmitry, he reinforces his knight. And okay, the engines are trying to figure this thing out here. Knight takes e5, queen takes b7.
Rook b8.
Rook b8. And then
queen takes d5.
Oh my goodness.
No, but then knight d3 check.
Yeah, because knight d3 is important. Because if you take, thinking, all right, I win this piece, then there's rook d1, and then you can't, maybe you can go there.
Bishop h3, but
bishop h3 was rook h7 and rook b7.
So you could defend it with both rooks.
Yeah, rooks from all angles.
Oh my gosh.
So take.
Oh my lord.
He just took back.
Oh my lands. Rook takes e5. And here comes queen b7 and rook takes d5 as you're showing. And how is this equal? I mean, I'm not surprised at anything anymore. It looks like black is an only move.
Queen d7. Oh my gosh, you still can't take the rook because of bishop g7, like we showed before.
Oh, and queen d7 vacates the d6 square for the bishop, so that if white takes on d5, you'll be able to interpose the pin.
Wow.
What a cold-blooded defensive move, and it's the only move that doesn't lose the game.
And it's like rook e8 check, because you take with the queen, then queen takes b7 still looks really nasty.
King c7.
Right? You just ignore the rook and king c7, and it looks like black is getting out of that one. This is
unbelievable.
This is really ridiculous. How to calculate all this? They both are now in not time trouble exactly, but considering how complicated the position is, you really would like an hour on your clock, not a few minutes.
I think Jeffrey's going to find it, though. It better not take him too long, though, because if he plays queen d7 with 30 seconds left, you ain't pulling this out.
No. And I'm just trying to see what's happening in some of the other games. And it looks like Levon is still going. Oh, I'm going to pull it up quickly, and then I'll come right back. Levon has separated pawns. This pawn is an H pawn. So do not, if you give up this bishop for this pawn, it's still winning for white because it's an H pawn.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
The king gets to b7, and then the bishop sacks itself for the other pawn.
Yes, that's what I was going to try to say. You need to sack for this pawn, and now the king sits on a8, and the bishop stops the pawn and will sacrifice whenever it gets there. So just here, and they draw by agreement. Levon probably doesn't realize that he was winning, but king b6, Danya, just keep the king out of the corner. It's just winning on the spot.
Yeah, it is. And then king d7, a6, a7, and the trousers overwhelm the king. You just start pushing the h pawn at the right moment.
Right, like you think that you have this bishop covering things over here. You go a7, and sure, the king can't get in, but now this king will have to be distracted this way because the h pawn is threatening to move up the board. So let's actually move here, h4, just to show this quickly and finish it out. This is the bishop moves back. You just have the move h5 because you can't take, and then there's a queen coming this way. So the king would have had to go this way, and then the king goes this way, and you get your queen.
Right, and you keep the right pawn. I mean, I think Levon would have found that if the circumstances were different, but he kind of relaxed. And back to the Jeffrey game we go. And it appears that Jeffrey failed to find the key move, and he's going to lose.
Oh, he's just checkmated right here.
Right on the spot, and that is a painful, painful loss that prevents him from qualifying. And Dmitry Andreikin is going to go through with a clutch win in the final round.
And what a sacrificial game it's been, right? Like Dmitry didn't care about material count. Down 2 pawns when we checked in. Then he sacked a piece. Then he just sacked everything at different points. He's on a rook right now. And it's just over.
Yeah, Black's pieces are totally discombobulated. And the opening experiment worked. I stand corrected.
Dmitry Andreikin. This
He's
king's
just
trying
in
to run
face.
away.
Yeah, but rook e1, queen f3, queen g4. I mean, I think if you just give a bunch of checks, it's going to be mate.
Yeah. And he takes this pawn.
Not the greatest move.
Well, now you can take this one as well. If you just want to go up material, you can take this pawn.
And then go rook e1 and enjoy your life.
Indeed. So what's happening on other boards? Let's see what else is relevant here for the standings. Let's go to Nordivek Abdusatarov's game just to see. Whoa, okay, this is a headache.
Oh!
Too many pieces on the board, but now white has fewer pieces, and this is potentially a big win for Abdusatarov.
Wait, did he just blunder that exchange, or was it already somehow bad to begin with?
We can quickly
I think he blundered it.
Yeah, he blundered
Oh, he
it.
did blunder it, and it was just totally fine for. Wait, white was like better.
He went Queen B2, walked right into it, and
Oh my
now
God.
Nordivek can play for a win without any risk.
And Noterbeck is going to get up to 6. So we're going to have a big, big logjam of players with 6 out of 9. And tie breaks are going to be critical here. I think Hans, who is now in the chat, he might have won his game to get to 6 as well. We'll check that out in a moment.
Yeah, we'll see how those tie breaks play out because more people will join, likely including Nordivek Abdusatarov. He's up on time. He's up in exchange. And this looks like it should be a W for him. And this game between Andreikin and Jeffrey Zhang, what?
It's starting to heat up a little bit. The bishop f5 and
you know this. How did this happen? How did he escape?
no, but queen g4 is coming, and white's king is actually perfectly safe. The counterplay is an illusion.
Well,
King D1.
throwing this pawn, king takes d2. He goes king d.
Bishop g4 though.
Bishop
Oh, and then queen takes h2, and is the king? No. Queen g6.
Yeah, rook f6. I thought that black all of a sudden was gonna have something here, but no. With this queen coming in, it looks like Dmitry has everything under control. There's a pawn on d2.
You're right. You can never sleep peacefully, but the king is basically safe unless you blunder something crazy.
Right. Now queen takes two is still queen g6 check, so you're stuck defending this square here.
Yeah, maybe just f4. Okay.
That's
Oh, hitting h6.
Really,
Clinical.
really nice. The only way to defend it would be rook h8, then you lose your bishop. So well spotted by Dmitry. He backs up one square and wins the game.
Yes, he does. Wins the game, gets into the Sunday knockout, and knocks Jeffrey Zhang out. An impressive win.
You can even take with the rook because there's no queen b3, and you're going to go bishop here or queen here. Yeah, you can
anything.
just grab it. Just grab it. Okay, let's go back to Abdusatarov then, because it's very important for the standings.
Oh. This game ain't over. Now, he's trying to checkmate black on the first rank with rook a1. But there's something that the eval bars strongly dislikes about this.
Yeah, what is it? Because this and this, as you're pointing out, followed by rook h1, and the other rook coming over to g1 would deliver a checkmate. So
maybe f3.
That's such a difficult move to play, I feel like, with your king getting more exposed. By the way, I'm just looking at the clock, Danya, and no matter what the eval bar says, I'm just liking Nordivek's chances.
Yeah, especially because this is going to be incredibly sharp for many, many moves to come, especially just because white just blundered a queen, and Noterbeck wins.
Yes, so that was a big win for Nordivek. I'm just looking at the standings, and there he is in the top 8. So,
well, so far it appears that he's made it, but we have to wait for the tie breaks to update.
And we have a few more games. They're not for the top 8 standings, but who doesn't like watching Dubov play, especially when the position is hectic like it is now. And it is actually winning for white. So the bar carried over from the previous game, but now it's catching up to what we're seeing here. And extra time, don't blunder, checkmate at 1.
Right. Oh, I was about to propose queen e5, which accidentally defends against the mate, but blunders the rook instead. Dubov does not blunder either. And he's going to win the game. Queen e3 simply.
Trade queens, win this pawn, throw it. Okay.
Okay.
Wants rook d6. So how's this position?
I mean, this is also pretty easy. Although, is it?
Yeah, the king's pretty safe, so you're never gonna get checks.
Queen b5?
Takes, f5. No, you're not taking that.
King c3 might be even... No, but now that white has eliminated the pawn, it's quite easy given the clock situation.
Right. And you can just... Actually, if you push that pawn, then there's check and check. Oh, there was check and check.
Wait, there... Oh, there was.
You want this check, but there is king h5, and after check
And
here,
then queen
there's
h2, queen h4, barely.
But
G5.
now it's... Oh, g5, king g4,
King
g6.
g4. Oh, yeah.
Take with a pawn.
Apparently that was very inaccurate.
Is this
This
some
might
kind
be
of
a draw because queen e6, there's king g5.
and check here?
No, but this is in a time scramble situation. If he defends this, I'll be mighty impressed.
Wow, he's just going everywhere. Check. You can't stop the checks.
You kind of can, though. You can go to h7 and then... Oh, and then queen h2.
Yeah,
and it's
just
very
keep
close to a
going.
repetition.
Oh,
No!
he made a mistake. Queen. Oh.
And so did Dubov.
Okay, but Duva's gonna flag him.
Easily. He's just going to walk his king around and king d5, and he's going to dance.
Go here or there, sure.
Anything is good.
And he wins on time. There it is, on time.
Yes.
Okay, well, the tournament is over. What are our standings?
Well, we're about to
Oh.
find out. We have Fedosseev, Aronian, and Jules Moussard headlining the top three, but
Oof.
we have plenty of people with 6 who didn't qualify, and it looks like Hans didn't quite make it.
Yeah, Hans and Arjun both at 6 and a 9, but do not make tomorrow's Sunday knockout because their tie breaks are just slightly inferior
By
to
0.25.
Oh, that's brutal.
And Maxim Matlakov, with another 8th seed. Now, you might remember the last time he came in 8th, he won the entire thing. He won every single game of the black pieces. So don't fall asleep on him. And Hikaru comfortably makes it with great tie breaks at number 6. Raunak Sadwani, also very impressive. And Jules Moussard, I think that's his very first entry into the Sunday knockout as well.
Yeah, but he had an impressive day. We actually kind of lost sight of him for a bit. We saw some of his games earlier, but he makes his way through. And Levon Aronian and the big fish, Vladimir Fedosseev, they are at the top of the standings. But that means that Fedosseev, he gets the white pieces, home court advantage, if you will, in tomorrow's action.
Well, I can't wait for that, but don't go anywhere because we're going to take a very, very short break, and then we're going to have the Coinbase Critical moment for you, and we're going to do a little bit of a conclusion and make some concluding thoughts. So stay with us. We'll be back with a Coinbase Rapid Recap in just a couple of moments.
The Rapid Chess Championship is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. You can earn crypto by learning about crypto at Coinbase.com. Explore DeFi and Web3 with your Coinbase wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with your Coinbase card and much, much more. Learn more at Coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. Check them out. Use the command sponsor or command Coinbase today and go to Coinbase.com to get that Bitcoin, baby.
back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. It is now time for the Coinbase Critical Moment. Grandmaster Vladimir Fedoseev had an excellent Saturday. He will be making an appearance tomorrow. And one of the biggest moments of his performance today came against none other than Hikaru Nakamura, Robert.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange opening by Hikaru. He put all his pawns on light squares, which means they're dark square vulnerability. And after this last move, F4, Danya, this is a big moment because F5 is clearly the threat. So Hikaru decided to deal with it, but it might have made matters worse.
Hikaru decided to deal with it in the most direct way possible. He put his own pawn on f5, but what he underestimated is that after e takes f5, black does not have any good recaptures. If you take back with the g-pawn, you open up the h5, e8 diagonal. There's a very, very nasty check on h5, sacrifices on f5. That's no good. Hikaru ended up taking on e5, on f5 with the e-pawn, but that creates a whole host, a litany of weaknesses in the center, which Fedoseev deftly took advantage of.
Yeah, because not even isolated pawn, and we just see simple development from Fedoseev. And then when the queen came to b3 with check, the pawn blocked, and rook e1, all of white's pieces are playing with purpose here, and black has hardly developed on the queen side. So Danya, it looks good, but let's see how Fedoseev, he knocked him out.
I mean, it was absolutely incredible. All of his pieces are in the center, and Hikaru did his best to patch up the holes, but there are simply too many holes. The bishop moves back to f2 and then over to h4, and now the knight jumps into g5, and he makes one threat after another, and he wins the exchange, because if Hikaru moves back to f8, you're indicating that knight e6 is a devastating fork. So Hikaru tried to give up the exchange under a better set of circumstances, but at the end of the day, the game is already decided.
Yes, and when your head material, it's okay to give some back. Rook takes e7 was a beautiful move, leading to the great checkmate. Very quick, just check. And here, after queen d5, queen f4, knight takes f5, and the game is over because the king is running out of squares in bishop e2. It forced resignation because this king is just hunted down, takes, king g5, queen h6 is check and mate.
And that is a very beautiful checkmate indeed. A great win for Vladimir Fedoseev, who started 5 out of 5, and who will be trying to make it count tomorrow. And that was your Coinbase Critical Moment. And speaking of tomorrow, the bracket for the Sunday knockout is already set. Fedoseev is the #1 seed, and he will be facing Maxim Matlakov, and Hikaru Nakamura over on your bottom right will be facing the newcomer, Jules Moussard, who will try to make his first appearance count.
Yeah, he'll also try to put a face to the name.
A photo, yeah.
Right now, we don't even have his avatar ready for you, but we will get that, don't you worry. And what I'm looking at is that top right. That is my favorite match of the first round. Levon Aronin with the white pieces against Nordibek Abdusattorov, the world rapid champion, the teenager from Uzbekistan, who's about to play in a tournament in Prague. This is a tournament that features Hans Niemann, other young players. I think Vincent Keimer might be playing, so a round robin with some of the best talent in the world. But tomorrow he faces one of the best players of all time, Levon Aronin.
It's going to be lit. It's going to be epic, and you will not want to miss the Sunday knockout, which will be coming your way at exactly the same time. The format, well, you know the format by now. It's an 8-player single elimination. The time control is slightly different. There will be a 2-second increment, unlike today. And hopefully we will see some Blitz playoffs and perhaps even an Armageddon if the individual matchup games are drawn.
Well, that would be exciting, wouldn't it? And we actually saw last week's conclusion come down to an Armageddon, and Alexander Grischuk came up on top. So Hikaru Nakamura, he wins many of these things, but there are 7 other players who are worthy competitors who will try to take him down. So, Donnie, I'm really excited to come back here tomorrow and commentate with you.
Likewise, I can't wait, and this was a lot of fun. So, Robert, thank you for another great day of chess, a great way to start the weekend. We hope you all enjoyed the show. We'd like to thank everybody in the Twitch and on YouTube for your active participation in chat and for your energy. And as always, we'd like to thank our producer, Matt, for another excellent broadcast. Robert, any final thoughts on today's Saturday Swiss?
I thought that, some players face a bit of tough luck. Others really showed their might. I think Levon Aronin, we didn't have to worry about him. And that's the sign of a superstar where he had some moments. I'm sure he didn't play the most precise moves, but he sailed through. And Hikaru Nakamura, despite losing the game, that was our critical moment, he once again finds himself in the top 8. He has not missed a single knockout to this point in the season.
That's incredible. I mean, try that on for size. Just chew on that for a second. And that kind of persistence has been rewarded. And we will see if he can keep his RCC domination going tomorrow. But for now, it's time for us to wrap up. And so, for our entire team at chess.com and everybody in the chat, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky and Grandmaster Robert Hess saying goodbye from the Saturday Swiss, from the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. We will see you tomorrow for the Sunday knockout. Goodbye.